Hayden Knox didn't plan to text a gangster. She only wanted her son to stop crying. It was 2 a.m. in the Pinewood Gardens apartments that hour, when even the usual sirens and arguments had faded into an uneasy silence. The kind of quiet that made Hayden's thoughts too loud. She sat on the peeling linoleum of her kitchenette floor, back against the cabinet, knees pulled to her chest. The power had been out since Tuesday. 3 days without electricity meant the last of Scout's formula had spoiled in the warming refrigerator. Scout's cries from the bedroom were getting weaker. That scared her more than the screaming had. The apartment was dark except for the blue glow of her cracked phone screen, 3% battery left. She could almost hear her mother's voice. "This is what happens when you think you're too good for Appalachia, girl." City dreams turned to city nightmares. Her thumb hovered over her brother's contact. Jake had helped before reluctantly, with a sermon attached, but he'd helped. Tonight wasn't about pride. It was about a baby who couldn't understand why his stomach hurt. "Jake," she typed. "I'm sorry to bother you this late. I need $40 for formula. Scout's completely out. I get paid Friday. I'll pay you back, I promise." Her thumb trembled as she hit send. She didn't double-check the number. Didn't even look at the name. She just set the phone down, dropped her forehead to her knees, and waited for the inevitable lecture or silence. 3 minutes later, her phone buzzed. "I think you have the wrong number." Hayden's stomach dropped. She grabbed the phone, checking the contact. 1 digit off from Jake's number. She'd texted a stranger at 2 a.m. asking for money. "I'm so sorry," she typed quickly. "Wrong number. Please ignore." She locked the screen, tossed the phone aside, and pulled her threadbare cardigan tighter. Another failure to add to the growing pile. In the Summit residences across town, Ezra Bishop stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, whiskey in hand, staring at the glittering city below a city that feared him without knowing his face. That was how he preferred it. The Bishop family had controlled Crescent Falls for 3 generations, evolving from street thugs to sophisticated criminals to semi-legitimate businessmen. His father had ruled through terror. Ezra preferred systems, structures, control. He looked down at his personal phone, the one only family had the number to. And now, apparently, a wrong number with a baby named Scout. The text wasn't a scam. It wasn't a trap. It was raw desperation. "Delete it," he told himself. "Not your problem." Most nights, he would have. Tonight, something made him type back. "Is your baby going to be okay?" Hayden stared at the new message. What kind of stranger followed up like that? Her first instinct was to block the number. Her second was to wonder if this was some kind of setup, maybe Child Protective Services finding new ways to target struggling mothers. But something about the question, about how simply it was asked, made her pause. "We'll manage," she wrote back. "Sorry again for the confusion." "I can help. No strings." Hayden scoffed aloud. In her experience, there were always strings, always a price. "Thanks, but I don't take money from strangers." "Smart policy. I'm Ezra. Now I'm not a stranger." She didn't reply. Instead, she rocked Scout, who had finally exhausted himself into fitful sleep. She wiped away the tears that came. The kind that weren't just from being broke, but from being tired of being broke. From watching her medical certifications expire because she couldn't afford the renewal fees. From having a degree that meant nothing when the hospital downsized. Scout whimpered, and something in Hayden broke. She picked up her phone and sent a Venmo ID. 5 seconds later, her phone buzzed. $5,000 received from Ezra Bishop. Hayden stared at the screen, certain she was hallucinating. $5,000? She blinked, opened the app again, checked the amount. Still there. "This is too much," she typed frantically. "I only needed $40. It's already yours. No catch. One less thing to worry about." She didn't cry when the hospital cut her position. She didn't cry when her car was repossessed. She didn't cry when Scout's father left town after learning she was pregnant. But this unexpected kindness from nowhere broke the dam. Her hands shook as she typed, "Thank you. I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," came the reply. "Just take care of Scout." Hayden froze, pulse quickening. She never mentioned her son's name. Ezra Bishop set down his phone, wondering what had possessed him. $5,000 meant nothing to him. A gambling tip, a bar tab on a good night. But the way he'd done it, the personal involvement, that wasn't like him. "What did you do?" Marcus Cole asked from the doorway of Ezra's office at the Palisade. His security chief could always read him. "Nothing important," Ezra replied, turning back to the financial reports spread across his desk. Marcus raised an eyebrow but didn't push. 15 years of friendship had taught him when to back off. "Julian's waiting downstairs with the books," Marcus said instead. Says there's a discrepancy in the liquor shipments you should see. Ezra nodded. Tell him I'll be down in 5. When Marcus left, Ezra found himself opening his phone again, looking at the exchange. He'd meant what he said, no strings. But he'd already done a basic search on the number. Hayden Knox, former lab tech at Northwest Regional, specialized in toxicology, single mother. Eviction notice filed last month. He shouldn't have looked her up, shouldn't have cared. It wasn't like him to get involved in strangers' problems. Then again, maybe that was the problem. Maybe he'd spent too long not caring about anything, except the family business, the endless cycle of shipments, protection, profit, the life his father had chosen for him, before he could choose for himself. Ezra tucked the phone away and headed downstairs. Whatever impulse had prompted his generosity, he'd satisfied it. The woman had her money. End of story. Or so he thought. Hayden couldn't sleep. Even after Scout finally drifted off, his breathing steady and his tiny stomach full for the first time in days, she sat awake in the dark, staring at the Venmo confirmation. $5,000. Still there. Still real. She'd already used $43 to order formula for overnight delivery, the expedited shipping costing almost as much as the formula itself. She'd paid her overdue electric bill online, the confirmation email promising power restoration by morning. But that still left over $4,800 more money than she'd seen at once since losing her job 11 months ago. She opened a browser on her phone and typed Ezra Bishop Crescent Falls. The first results made her blood run cold. Bishop family interests acquired downtown properties. Ezra Bishop cleared in racketeering investigation. The Quiet King. How Ezra Bishop reshaped Crescent Falls underworld. She clicked the last article, skimming quickly. The piece was 3 years old, clearly written by someone trying to be the next great crime journalist, full of innuendo but light on facts. But the message was clear. Ezra Bishop was not just wealthy, he was connected, dangerous. The kind of man whose family name made cops look the other way, and politicians suddenly forget their campaign promises. There was only one photo. A tall man in an expensive suit leaving a courthouse, face turned away from cameras, surrounded by lawyers and what were obviously security personnel. Hayden set the phone down, her hands trembling slightly. The man who'd just sent her $5,000 wasn't some random Good Samaritan. He was Ezra Bishop, the Ezra Bishop. The man who, according to urban legend, had once had a city councilman's car crushed into a cube with the councilman still inside it. The man whose family allegedly controlled every major vice operation in 3 counties. And somehow, he'd found her name. Found Scout's name. Without her telling him, she picked up her phone again, fingers hovering over the Venmo app. She could return the money. Should return it. Nothing good ever came from being in debt to people like Ezra Bishop. But returning it wouldn't erase the fact that he knew who she was. And Scout needed that formula. Needed electricity. Needed a mother who could keep him safe and fed. Her phone buzzed with a new message. You should get some sleep, Hayden. Her heart nearly stopped. She hadn't given him her name either. How do you know who I am? She typed back, fear competing with indignation. The same way I know you're a certified lab tech with a specialization in toxicology who was laid off from Northwest Regional during last year's budget cuts. Hayden stared at the message, ice forming in her stomach. He'd researched her. Thoroughly. What do you want from me? She finally asked. There was a long pause before his answer came through. Nothing. Not everyone has an angle, Hayden. In my experience, people with power always have an angle, she replied. Especially people who look up strangers in the middle of the night. Another pause. Fair point. But sometimes helping someone is just helping someone. Get some sleep. The money's yours to use however you need. Hayden didn't respond. She put the phone face down on her nightstand and curled up beside Scout's portable crib, one hand reaching through the slats to rest on his tiny back, feeling his heartbeat. She didn't trust Ezra Bishop. Couldn't trust him. But for tonight, at least, Scout would have formula. The lights would come back on. And tomorrow, she could figure out what to do about the unexpected charity of a man whose name made hardened cops nervous. Morning brought no clarity, but it did bring electricity. The hum of the refrigerator coming back to life woke Hayden just after 7. Scout was already awake, babbling to himself and reaching for the stuffed rabbit that had been his constant companion since birth. Morning, buddy, she whispered, lifting him from the crib. Things are looking up today. The overnight delivery had arrived 3 cans of formula stacked neatly outside her door. She mixed a bottle with hands that had stopped shaking, watching Scout's eyes light up at the sight. As he drank, Hayden checked her bank account on her now charging phone. The Venmo transfer had cleared. $4,957 after the formula and electric bill. More money than she'd had in her account in over a year. The responsible thing would be to put it aside for rent, for Scout's needs, for emergencies. The smart thing would be to ignore the strange circumstances of how she'd acquired it. But Hayden had never been good at ignoring things. Her mind kept returning to the text conversation, to the fact that Ezra Bishop, of all people, had bothered to help a random wrong number, to the way he'd researched her so thoroughly. Her phone buzzed with a new message. "Good morning. The power should be back on by now." Hayden stared at the screen. He was checking on her. "Why? It's on," she replied cautiously. "Thank you again for the help with the formula. I'll pay you back when I can." "That won't be necessary." She hesitated, then typed, "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead. Why did you help me?" The truth. The reply took longer this time. Scout finished his bottle, and Hayden was burping him when the message finally came through. "Because I recognized something in your text." Pride mixed with desperation. "You weren't asking for a handout. You were trying to keep your child fed no matter the cost to your dignity. I respect that." It was more honest than she'd expected. Still didn't explain the $5,000 instead of $40, but it was something. "Thank you," she wrote back. "For the formula and for not making me feel like a charity case." "You're welcome." Then after a moment, "I have a proposition for you if you're interested." And there it was. The catch she'd been waiting for. Hayden's stomach tightened. "What kind of proposition?" she asked, already preparing to refuse. "A job. At the Palisade. Your medical background would be valuable." Hayden blinked. "A job? At the Palisade, the upscale restaurant known as much for its celebrity clientele as for the rumors about what happened in its back rooms? What kind of job?" she asked, suspicion still foremost in her mind. "We need someone with lab experience to handle quality control for our supplies. Food and beverage testing, ensuring regulatory compliance. Nothing illegal, before you ask. Good salary, flexible hours, childcare provided." It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. "Why me?" she pressed. "You could hire anyone with my qualifications." "I could," Ezra agreed. "But you've already shown me something important about your character. You put your child first, but you maintain your dignity. That combination is rare." Hayden sat down on her worn couch, Scout now dozing against her shoulder. A job. With a salary. With childcare. The things she'd been desperately searching for since Northwest Regional cut her position. But working for Ezra Bishop? For a family known for its criminal connections? What would that make her? "I don't know," she replied honestly. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure it's right for me." "I understand," came the surprisingly respectful response. "The offer stands if you change your mind. No pressure, no timeline." Hayden set the phone down, certain that would be the end of it. Ezra Bishop had done his good deed, made his offer, and now would move on to whatever crime lords did with their days. Her phone buzzed one more time. "One last thing, there's a delivery coming to your apartment today. For Scout. Consider it an investment in his future, not yours. No strings, no obligation to accept the job." Before Hayden could respond, a knock came at her door. The delivery wasn't a package. It was 4 large boxes and a furniture delivery crew with instructions to set up what turned out to be the most expensive crib Hayden had ever seen, along with a changing table, a dresser full of clothes in Scout's size and larger, toys, books, diapers, more formula than she could use in a month, and even a small refrigerator stocked with prepared meals. "There must be a mistake," she told the delivery foreman. "No mistake, ma'am," the man replied, handing her a small envelope. "All paid for, including the setup. Have a good day." Inside the envelope was a simple note on heavy cardstock. "Scout deserves every opportunity. So do you. No strings, no expectations. E.B." Hayden stood in the middle of her transformed apartment, Scout babbling happily in his new crib, surrounded by evidence that Ezra Bishop was either the most generous man she'd ever encountered, or the most dangerous. Or possibly both. For 3 days, Hayden tried to ignore the brand new furniture, the stocked refrigerator, and the business card that had been tucked into the envelope with Ezra Bishop's note. The card was heavy, textured stock, just "The Palisade," embossed in deep green on cream, with a phone number beneath it. She'd moved the card from the counter to a drawer, then to her wallet, then back to the counter. It seemed to have gravity, pulling her attention whenever she passed. "You need to return all this stuff," Delia insisted when she stopped by after her hospital shift. Hayden's friend stood amid the baby gear, arms crossed, expression grim. You know who the Bishops are, right? Of course I do, Hayden replied, bouncing Scout on her hip. But what am I supposed to do? Load it all into my non-existent car? Call the stores and have them pick it up. Send the money back. Cut all ties. Delia's voice softened. Hayden, men like Ezra Bishop don't just help strangers out of the goodness of their hearts. Then why did he? Delia had no answer for that. After she left, Hayden sat in the new glider rocker, Scout asleep on her chest, and stared at the business card. The Palisade, quality control, a real job using her actual skills, childcare for Scout. She hadn't applied for a lab position in months, not since the last rejection email mentioned her gap in relevant employment, as a polite way of saying her skills were getting rusty. With a sigh of resignation, Hayden pulled out her phone. Can I ask you something? She texted Ezra. The reply came almost immediately. Of course. Why did you look me up after I texted you? The truth. This time the response took longer. Because your message wasn't a scam or a hustle. It was honest. That's rare in my world. I was curious about who you were. And the job offer? That's because you're curious too? No. That's because I need someone with your skills. And I believe in rewarding determination. You've fought to keep yourself and Scout afloat despite significant obstacles. That says more about your character than any resume. Hayden frowned. It was a good answer. Too good. Like he'd anticipated her question. What would the job really entail? She asked. Come see for yourself. Tomorrow 2 p.m. The Palisade. Bring Scout. I'll have appropriate accommodations ready. Hayden hesitated. Going to the Palisade, meeting Ezra Bishop face to face, it would make this strange situation real in a way texting hadn't. No commitment, Ezra added, as if sensing her hesitation. Just a conversation and a tour. If you're not comfortable, you walk away. Scout stirred against her chest, making the soft snuffling sounds that preceded waking. Hayden looked down at his perfect face, the tiny eyelashes, the rosebud mouth. He deserved better than this apartment, better than watered-down formula, better than a mother who couldn't keep the electricity on. I'll be there, she typed. 2 p.m. The Palisade didn't look like a mob front. It looked like exactly what it claimed to be an upscale restaurant and lounge catering to Crescent Falls elite. The limestone building occupied prime real estate downtown, its Art Deco facade restored to period-accurate perfection. Hayden approached the front entrance with Scout and his carrier, feeling profoundly out of place in her only presentable outfit, dark jeans, a green blouse, and a black blazer that had seen better days. She'd spent an hour on her appearance that morning, trying to look professional despite her limited wardrobe. A host in a tailored suit greeted her at the door. Miss Knox, he said with a deferential nod that caught her off guard. Mr. Bishop is expecting you. Please follow me. He led her not into the main dining area, but through a side door and up a private elevator. Scout, usually wary of strangers, was oddly calm, taking in the new surroundings with curious eyes. The elevator opened directly into a stunning office space. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. The decor was minimalist, dark woods, leather, glass, but exuded quiet power. Ezra Bishop stood at one of the windows, his back to them. Even from behind, he commanded attention, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal suit that spoke of money without flaunting it. Thank you, James, he said without turning. Please send in Marcus with the portfolio. The host nodded and disappeared back into the elevator. Hayden stood awkwardly, unsure if she should speak first. Before she could decide, Ezra turned. He was younger than she'd expected, mid-30s, maybe with the kind of features that belonged in a Renaissance painting rather than a crime lord's office. Strong jaw, straight nose, dark hair cut short and neat, but it was his eyes that held her deep green, observant, assessing her with the same careful attention she was giving him. Hayden, he said, his voice a smooth baritone that matched his texts somehow. Thank you for coming. His gaze dropped to Scout. And this must be the young man I've heard so much about. He approached, movements controlled, deliberate. Hayden resisted the urge to step back. Instead, she watched as he crouched slightly to look at Scout, maintaining a respectful distance. He has your eyes, Ezra observed. Observant, taking everything in. Scout stared back at Ezra, then broke into an unexpected smile, reaching toward him with chubby fingers. Traitor, Hayden muttered, then flushed. Sorry, he's not usually this friendly with strangers. Ezra's lips curved slightly. I'll take it as a compliment. He straightened. Please, sit. We have a lot to discuss. The elevator doors opened again, and a man entered carrying a leather portfolio. Tall, black, With military bearing and watchful eyes, he nodded to Hayden before handing the portfolio to Ezra. "Marcus Cole, my head of security," Ezra introduced. "Marcus, this is Hayden Knox and Scout." "Ma'am," Marcus said with a nod that was polite but reserved. He turned to Ezra. "Everything's set up as requested. Thank you. That's all for now." Marcus left, but not before giving Hayden one final assessing look that made her wonder what exactly Ezra had told him about her. "Now," Ezra said, opening the portfolio on the desk between them, "let's talk about why you're here." Hayden shifted Scout to her lap. "I assume it's because you need someone with my background for something that's not entirely legitimate." Ezra's eyebrow rose slightly. "Actually, the position is entirely legitimate. Quality control for our food and beverage program, including alcohol authentication for our rare spirits collection." He slid a document across the desk. It was a job description, professional, detailed, outlining responsibilities that matched her qualifications almost perfectly. "This is a real position," she said, unable to hide her surprise. "Of course it is. The Palisade is a legitimate business, despite what you may have read in sensationalist articles. But you're not denying that the Bishop family has other interests." Ezra studied her for a moment. "You're direct. I appreciate that." He leaned back in his chair. "The Bishop family has diverse holdings across Crescent Falls. Some of those businesses operate in regulatory gray areas. The Palisade isn't one of them. So I wouldn't be testing anything illegal? No. You would be ensuring our customers receive exactly what they pay for. Nothing more, nothing less. The position comes with a salary of $85,000 annually, full benefits, and an on-site childcare facility staffed by qualified professionals." Hayden's breath caught. $85,000 was more than twice what she'd made at the hospital. "Why me?" she asked again. "And don't say it's just because I have the right background." Ezra's expression shifted, becoming more serious. 2 months ago, we had an incident. A customer claimed one of our high-end bourbons was counterfeit. It wasn't, but the accusation did damage. I need someone who can verify the authenticity of our products beyond question. Someone with medical-grade lab skills. It was a reasonable explanation. Almost too reasonable. And it has nothing to do with me accidentally texting you in the middle of the night. That's how I found you, Ezra admitted, but not why I'm offering you the position. I did my research, Hayden. Your supervisor at Northwest Regional described you as meticulous and incorruptible. Those are qualities I value. Hayden felt off balance. This wasn't how she'd expected the meeting to go. The job was real. The salary was incredible. And Ezra Bishop, despite his reputation, seemed reasonable. "I'd like to show you the lab," he said, standing, "and the childcare facility. Then you can decide." The lab was state-of-the-art, better equipped than the one she'd worked in at the hospital. The childcare room was equally impressive, bright, secure, staffed by a woman with early childhood education credentials who took to Scout immediately. By the time they returned to Ezra's office, Hayden's suspicion was battling with genuine interest. The position aligned perfectly with her skills. The salary would transform her and Scout's lives. And despite her best efforts to remain wary, she found herself drawn to Ezra's quiet confidence, his evident intelligence. "Questions?" he asked as they sat again. "When would you need an answer?" "Take the weekend to think about it. The position is yours if you want it." Hayden nodded, gathering Scout's carrier. "I'll let you know by Monday." As she turned to leave, Ezra spoke again. "Hayden." She looked back. "Whatever you decide, the things I sent for Scout, they're gifts, not obligations. No strings attached." She studied his face, looking for deception, for manipulation, for any sign that this was all some elaborate game. She found none. "Thank you," she said finally, "for the opportunity, and for helping us when you didn't have to." Something flickered in Ezra's eyes, satisfaction, perhaps, or something deeper. Sometimes the right thing and the advantageous thing align perfectly. This is one of those times. Monday morning found Hayden standing outside the Palisade, Scout bundled against the October chill, anxiety and anticipation battling in her stomach. She'd spent the weekend weighing her options, which had really meant cataloging her lack of them. 3 job applications sent out Friday had already received automated rejections. Her savings, even with Ezra's contribution, would only last a few months. And every time she'd looked at Scout, at his bright eyes and curious expression, she'd thought about the opportunities this position could provide him. So here she was, about to accept a job from a man whose family name made veteran cops nervous. A man who had, for reasons she still didn't fully understand, decided to change her life with a mistaken text. The same host greeted her, James, leading her once again to the private elevator. This time, Ezra was waiting in his office, reviewing documents with a sharp-featured woman who looked up when Hayden entered. "Ah, Hayden," Ezra said, rising. "Perfect timing. I'd like you to meet my sister, Vivian Bishop. She handles our legitimate business operations." Vivian's handshake was firm, her assessment frank. "So you're the toxicology expert," she said, her tone neutral, but not unfriendly. "Ezra speaks highly of your qualifications. I'm surprised he mentioned me at all," Hayden replied honestly. Vivian's lips curved slightly. "My brother rarely does anything without purpose, Miss Knox, including recruiting specialized talent." She gathered her files. "I'll leave you to discuss the details. The quarterly projections are on your desk, Ezra. We'll need your sign-off by Wednesday." After she left, Ezra turned to Hayden. "You've made a decision." It wasn't a question, but Hayden nodded anyway. "I'll take the position. On a trial basis. 3 months, and then we both reassess." "Agreed." Ezra offered his hand, and they shook on it. His grip was warm, firm without being domineering. "You can start today, if that works for you." "Today?" Hayden adjusted Scout on her hip. "I didn't bring anything. Everything you need is already here. Lab coats, equipment, supplies, and Scout's space in the childcare center is prepared." He paused, studying her. "Unless you need more time?" Hayden thought about her empty apartment, the stack of past due notices, the walls that seemed to close in a little more each day. "No," she said firmly. "Today is perfect." The lab was on the 3rd floor, a space that had clearly been designed with careful attention to detail. Modern equipment, ergonomic workstations, and a security system that required both a keycard and fingerprint authentication. "Only you, me, and Vivian will have full access," Ezra explained as he walked her through the protocols. "Marcus has emergency override capabilities, but otherwise this space is your domain." Hayden ran her hand along the pristine countertop, feeling a familiar excitement she hadn't experienced since before her layoff. This was a real lab, a professional space where her skills would matter. "What will I be testing first?" she asked. Ezra gestured to a locked cabinet. "We've acquired a collection of rare Japanese whiskeys. Some are legitimate, some are exceptional counterfeits. I need to know which are which before they're added to our inventory." "How would you normally verify them? Certificates of authenticity? Provenance documentation?" "But in the high-end spirits market, those can be forged. I need chemical analysis to be certain." Hayden nodded. It was a reasonable first assignment, challenging but not overwhelming, and clearly aligned with the restaurant's legitimate business interests. "I'll need to develop protocols, calibrate the equipment." "Take whatever time you need," Ezra interrupted. "Do it right, not fast." Before she could respond, a soft knock came at the door. A woman in her early 60s entered, carrying Scout with practiced ease. "Mr. Bishop, Miss Holloway, I thought you might want to see how well our little man is settling in." She smiled warmly at Hayden. "I'm Helen, the childcare director. Scout and I have been getting acquainted." Scout looked comfortable in Helen's arms, reaching for a colorful toy she held. He showed no signs of distress at being separated from Hayden. "He's doing well?" Hayden asked, the knot of maternal anxiety loosening slightly. "Wonderfully. He's very social for his age already, talking to our other little one." Helen bounced Scout gently. "I wanted to ask about his nap schedule and any preferences for his bottles." As Hayden provided Scout's routine details, she was struck by Helen's genuine interest and professionalism. This wasn't some makeshift babysitting service. It was a proper childcare facility, staffed by someone who clearly knew what they were doing. After Helen left with Scout, Ezra handed Hayden a security badge and lab coat. "I'll leave you to get settled," he said. "If you need anything, my office extension is programmed into the lab phone. Otherwise, I'll check in at the end of the day." Alone in the lab, Hayden took a deep breath. This was really happening. She was working for Ezra Bishop, in a state-of-the-art facility, earning more than she ever had before. It felt surreal, like she might wake up any moment back in her cold apartment, Scout crying with hunger. She pulled on the lab coat perfectly her size, of course, and got to work. By 5 o'clock, Hayden had cataloged the whiskey collection, calibrated the primary testing equipment, and designed initial verification protocols. She'd fallen into a familiar rhythm, the work engaging her mind in ways she'd missed desperately. She was recording baseline measurements when Ezra entered the lab. "Productive day?" he asked, staying near the door as if respecting her space. "Very," Hayden replied, surprised by her own enthusiasm. Your equipment is impressive, better than what I had at Northwest Regional. I believe in investing in the right tools. He stepped closer, examining her notes without touching them. You've already developed testing protocols. Preliminary ones. I'll need to run some control samples tomorrow to verify accuracy. Ezra nodded, looking pleased. You work quickly. I've been out of a lab for almost a year, Hayden admitted. I missed it. Something in her tone must have registered, because Ezra's expression shifted subtly. Being unable to use your skills, that must have been difficult. Losing my job was difficult. Watching my certifications expire because I couldn't afford renewal was worse. Hayden hadn't meant to reveal that much, but something about the quiet lab, the satisfaction of productive work, had lowered her guard. Your certifications have been renewed, Ezra said casually. Hayden's head snapped up. What? I took the liberty of handling the paperwork and fees. The confirmations should arrive this week. She stared at him. You didn't have to do that. It's a business expense. You're more valuable with current certifications. The explanation was logical, practical. But Hayden sensed there was more to it, another act of generosity disguised as business strategy. Thank you, she said simply. Ezra acknowledged this with a slight nod, then changed the subject. Helen tells me Scout has been exemplary today. She's impressed with his verbal development. He's always been an early talker, babbles constantly, like he's trying to join the conversation. That suggests intelligence, Ezra observed, and good maternal attachment. Hayden felt a flush of pride. He's pretty amazing. I'm biased, but still. For a moment, they stood in comfortable silence, the rapport between them unexpectedly easy. Then Ezra checked his watch. I have a meeting downstairs. Take tomorrow to finish setting up the lab as you like. We'll begin the whiskey authentication on Wednesday. As he turned to leave, Hayden called after him. Ezra? He paused. This job, it's real. Not just a cover for something else. He studied her for a moment. Yes, it's real. The Bishop family businesses may exist in gray areas, Hayden, but this position isn't one of them. I need your skills for exactly the purpose I described. She believed him, which was perhaps the most surprising development of the day. 2 weeks into her new position, Hayden had settled into a routine that still felt somewhat dreamlike. She arrived at the Palisade each morning at 8, dropping Scout at the childcare center where he was thriving under Helen's attention. She spent her days in the lab, verifying alcohol authenticity, developing testing protocols, occasionally consulting with the restaurant's beverage director. She saw Ezra most days, usually briefly. Their interactions remained professional but increasingly comfortable. He respected her expertise, never questioned her methods, and seemed genuinely interested in her findings. The work itself was fascinating, more challenging than she'd anticipated. High-end counterfeit spirits were sophisticated operations, sometimes detectable only through detailed chemical analysis. She'd already identified 3 fake bottles in the Japanese whiskey collection, saving the Palisade thousands of dollars and potential reputation damage. More importantly, Scout was flourishing. The stability, the proper nutrition, the stimulating childcare environment, all of it showed in his development. He'd started pulling himself up to standing, babbling with greater complexity, engaging with the world around him with confident curiosity, and Hayden herself felt transformed. The constant knot of anxiety in her chest had loosened. She'd moved to a better apartment closer to the Palisade, furnished it modestly but comfortably, started rebuilding her professional wardrobe piece by piece. She was just finishing her analysis of a particularly tricky bourbon when her lab phone rang Ezra's extension. Can you come to my office? He asked without preamble. There's something you should see. His tone sent a ripple of unease through her. Now? Ezra's office was occupied by 3 people when she arrived. Ezra himself, looking unusually tense. Marcus, standing by the window with his arms crossed, and an elderly man Hayden hadn't met, seated in one of the leather chairs with the bearing of someone accustomed to deference. Hayden, Ezra greeted her, his voice controlled. This is Raymond Fletcher, an advisor to my family. Raymond, Hayden Knox, our quality control specialist. The old man assessed her with shrewd eyes. So this is the lab technician you've been so impressed with? I am, Ezra confirmed, and she's just become even more valuable to us. He gestured to a collection of bottles on his desk. Tell her what you found, Raymond. The old man leaned forward. 3 days ago, I received information that someone has been introducing contaminated spirits into our supply chain. Specifically, bourbon laced with a compound that wouldn't be detected by standard testing. Hayden's professional interest was immediately piqued. What kind of compound? A synthetic toxin, Ezra said flatly. Designed to cause illness, not death. Difficult to trace back to its source. We've identified these bottles as potentially contaminated, Raymond continued, indicating the collection on the desk. They were delivered yesterday, slated for our premium bourbon flight this weekend. Hayden's mind was already racing through testing protocols. I can analyze them, but I'll need to modify my equipment settings to look for synthetic compounds. That's why I asked you here, Ezra interrupted. This isn't just about quality control anymore. Someone is deliberately targeting our business. If customers get sick from our alcohol, your reputation is destroyed, Hayden finished. And that affects all your operations, legitimate and otherwise. A silence fell over the room. It was the first time Hayden had directly acknowledged the dual nature of the Bishop enterprises. Raymond broke the silence with a dry chuckle. She's perceptive, he said to Ezra. I can see why you brought her in. Can you identify the toxin? Marcus asked Hayden, speaking for the first time. And trace where it came from? I need to know what I'm looking for, Hayden replied. But yes, with the right parameters, I can isolate foreign compounds. Ezra's expression hardened. Then let's find out who's trying to poison my customers. As she gathered the bottles, Hayden realized this was a turning point. She was no longer just testing whiskey for authenticity. She was now directly involved in Bishop family business, the kind that had nothing to do with restaurant operations and everything to do with power, territory, and retaliation. The strangest part? She wasn't afraid. She was intrigued, professionally challenged in a way she hadn't been in years. I'll need 24 hours for preliminary analysis, she told Ezra. If I find something, I'll let you know immediately. He nodded, his gaze intense. Thank you, Hayden. As she turned to leave with the bottles, Raymond called after her. Miss Knox. She paused. Be careful with those samples. The person behind this wouldn't hesitate to eliminate anyone who gets in their way. The warning sent a chill down her spine, but Hayden kept her expression neutral. I always take proper precautions, Mr. Fletcher. It's standard lab protocol. Back in her lab, security doors locked behind her, Hayden began preparing the tests with meticulous care. The rational part of her mind screamed that she should walk away, grab Scout, and never return to the Palisade. But a stronger instinct, professional pride, curiosity, and something else she wasn't ready to examine kept her hands steady as she worked. Someone was targeting Ezra Bishop's business, using toxins her area of expertise. If she could identify the compound, trace its source, she would be doing more than quality control. She would be proving her value beyond question. And maybe, just maybe, uncovering why Ezra Bishop had really hired her in the first place. Hayden worked through the night, running sample after sample through the mass spectrometer. Scout slept peacefully in a portable crib Helen had set up in the corner of the lab, close enough for Hayden to check on him, far enough to keep him safe from chemicals and equipment. By dawn, she had her answer, and it was worse than she'd expected. The bourbon contained traces of a modified ricin compound subtle enough to evade standard testing, potent enough to cause severe illness. It wasn't just a business attack. It was attempted mass poisoning. She called Ezra at 6:30 a.m. I found it, she said when he answered, her voice tense with exhaustion and concern. Modified ricin derivative, professionally manufactured. Not lethal in these doses, but it would put at least a dozen people in the hospital. There was a pause on the line. How quickly can it be traced? That's the problem, Hayden replied. This isn't street chemistry. This is pharmaceutical-grade work. Someone with access to a proper lab and advanced knowledge of toxicology. Like you, Ezra said, his voice carefully neutral. The implication hung between them, unspoken but unmistakable. She'd been at the Palisade only 2 weeks. The contaminated bottles arrived after she started, and toxicology was her specialty. I didn't do this, Ezra. I know, he responded immediately. That's not what I meant. I meant whoever did this has your level of expertise. Hayden exhaled, tension draining from her shoulders. I'll keep working. There might be markers I can isolate that point to a specific lab. No, Ezra said firmly. You've done enough for now. Get some rest. Bring Scout to the childcare center and use the apartment on the 4th floor. There's an apartment? For late nights. Security monitored, fully furnished. Marcus will show you. Hayden wanted to argue, to insist she could keep working, but exhaustion was clouding her judgment. And the thought of taking Scout home, knowing someone with the skill to create modified ricin was targeting the Palisade, it didn't feel safe. Okay, she agreed. But I want to resume testing after a few hours of sleep. Of course. And Hayden, thank you. The genuine gratitude in his voice followed her as she gathered Scout and her essential belongings. Somehow, In the span of 2 weeks, she'd gone from suspicious job applicant to trusted ally. The transition should have alarmed her. Instead, it felt strangely right, like finding a place where her skills were finally valued. The apartment was actually a luxurious suite open-plan living area, state-of-the-art kitchen, bedroom with a crib already set up, and a bathroom bigger than her first apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city awakening, while blackout curtains could be engaged with the touch of a button. Security panel by the door, Marcus explained as he showed her in. Biometric lock, panic button, direct line to our security team. Fully stocked fridge and pantry, clothes in your size in the closet. Hayden raised an eyebrow at that last detail. Standard procedure, Marcus clarified. We maintain accommodations for key personnel who may need to remain on site. And the clothes in my size? That's standard too? Marcus's typically stoic expression softened slightly. That was Ezra. He likes to be prepared. After he left, Hayden put Scout down for his morning nap, showered, and changed into the provided clothes, simple but expensive, perfectly fitted as if chosen specifically for her. As she towel-dried her hair, she caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back seemed different from the desperate mother who'd texted a wrong number 3 weeks ago. More confident, less haunted, her brown eyes clearer, her posture straighter. She'd changed, and not just because of the salary or the stable environment. Working at the Palisade had given her something she'd lost after being laid off: purpose. Using her skills not just for routine testing, but to protect people, even if those people were customers of a business with questionable connections. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ezra. Meeting in my office, 2 p.m. Raymond has information on the contamination source. Hayden glanced at the sleeping Scout, then back at her reflection. She'd entered a world she barely understood, one with rules and dangers she was only beginning to grasp. But strangely, she didn't feel out of place. She felt challenged, engaged, alive in a way she hadn't for months. The meeting at 2 p.m. included Ezra, Raymond, Marcus, and Vivian. Hayden entered the office with her preliminary report. Scout left in Helen's capable hands. Miss Knox, Raymond greeted her, his tone more respectful than their first meeting. Your analysis has proven invaluable. Tell me you've found the source, Hayden said, taking a seat. Ezra nodded to Marcus, who pulled up images on the wall-mounted screen, a man in his 40s, unremarkable except for the cold calculation in his eyes. Julian Hayes, Marcus explained. Our chief financial advisor for the past 3 years. And, as of this morning, our prime suspect. Hayden studied the image. He has access to toxicology resources? His brother-in-law runs North Star Pharmaceuticals, Vivian supplied. A company that, coincidentally, specializes in controlled substances and their derivatives. Julian has been pushing to expand our spirits program for months, Ezra continued. Specifically, he wanted to handle supplier relationships personally. I declined. So he decided to create a crisis he could solve, Hayden deduced. Contaminate the bourbon, let people get sick, then step in with a better supply chain he controls. Exactly, Raymond confirmed. Classic power play. Manufacture a problem, provide the solution, gain influence. But that's not all, Vivian added, her voice tight with controlled anger. While investigating Julian, we found evidence of financial irregularities, siphoned funds, manipulated accounts. Ezra's expression was stone. He's been stealing from us for at least a year. Small amounts, carefully hidden. The contamination scheme was likely an attempt to distract us from his embezzlement. Hayden absorbed this information, connecting it to her findings. The ricin compound is expensive to produce. He needed money to fund his plan. Precisely. Raymond nodded, looking impressed. You understand the connections quickly, Miss Knox. So, what happens now? Hayden asked, carefully not specifying what happens might entail for someone who stole from and attempted to poison the customers of a crime family. Now, Ezra said, standing, we gather conclusive evidence. Your lab results, financial records Vivian has compiled, supplier documentation. We build an airtight case. And then? Hayden pressed. Ezra met her gaze directly. And then we handle it appropriately. The vague answer hung in the air, laden with implications Hayden chose not to examine too closely. I need 1 more day with the samples, she said instead. There's a signature compound I want to isolate, something that would definitively link the ricin to North Star's labs. You'll have it, Ezra assured her. In the meantime, I'd like you and Scout to continue using the apartment. Until this is resolved, it's safer. Hayden nodded, recognizing the logic even as she noted the increasing entanglement of her life with the palisade with Ezra Bishop's world. As the meeting concluded, Vivian pulled Hayden aside. "A word of advice," she said quietly. "You've proven yourself valuable, which is good. But it also puts you in the inner circle of a world you may not fully understand yet." "I'm aware of that," Hayden replied. "Are you?" Vivian studied her. "Because once you're in, truly in, there's no easy way out. My brother sees something in you, Hayden. Make sure you understand what that means before you go any deeper." With that cryptic warning, she left, leaving Hayden with an unsettled feeling that persisted as she returned to her lab. The next 3 days blurred together in a rhythm of testing, analysis, and careful documentation. Hayden isolated the compound signature, definitively linking it to Northstar's proprietary formulation process. She compiled her findings into a comprehensive report, professional and detailed, as if she were preparing court evidence rather than information for a crime family. During this time, Scout and she remained in the apartment, venturing out only to the lab and childcare center. She saw little of Ezra, who was occupied with what Marcus cryptically referred to as containment measures. On the 4th day, as Hayden was finalizing her report, the lab door opened. Ezra entered, looking more tired than she'd seen him, but with a controlled energy that suggested resolution rather than defeat. "It's done," he said simply. Hayden set down her pen. "Julian, has been handled. The contaminated bourbon has been neutralized. The financial irregularities addressed." The deliberate vagueness told her everything and nothing. Hayden didn't press for details she suspected she wouldn't want to know. "Was my report helpful?" she asked instead. "Instrumental," Ezra confirmed. "Your analysis provided the final piece we needed." He moved closer, stopping at the edge of her workspace close enough for conversation, distant enough to respect her space. It was a consideration she'd noticed consistently in their interactions. "I owe you an apology," he continued. "When you accepted this position, I didn't anticipate involving you in family business to this extent." "You mean you didn't plan on me helping investigate attempted poisoning and embezzlement?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Not in the first month. No," Hayden set her report aside, turning to face him fully. "I'm a toxicologist, Ezra. Identifying dangerous compounds is literally my job. Yes, but there's a difference between testing spirits for authenticity and being drawn into internal conflicts. Are you concerned about my safety or my conscience?" Ezra considered this. Both, actually. The admission surprised her. Most people in his position wouldn't care about either. "I'm an adult," Hayden said. "I made choices that brought me here. I could have walked away when I realized what was happening." "But you didn't," Ezra observed. "Why?" It was a question she'd been asking herself. The answer came more easily than expected. "Because, for the first time in over a year, I feel useful. Respected for my skills. What I do here matters not just to the business, but to people's safety." She paused. "And because you gave Scout and me a chance when no one else would." Ezra studied her, something unreadable in his expression. "Loyalty is rare in my world, Hayden. People serve the Bishop family out of fear or self-interest, rarely out of genuine commitment. I'm not loyal to the Bishop family," she clarified. "I'm loyal to my job. And maybe," she added, surprising herself, "to you." The distinction hung between them, significant in ways neither fully articulated. "In that case," Ezra said finally, "I have another proposition for you." The proposition was both simpler and more complex than Hayden had anticipated. Expand her role beyond spirits authentication to include oversight of all Bishop family imports, alcohol, yes, but also specialty foods, certain pharmaceuticals, and various other goods that flowed through their legitimate businesses. "You have the scientific background to evaluate quality and safety," Ezra explained as they discussed the new position over dinner in his office. Scout sat in a high chair between them, happily demolishing pieces of pasta. "And after the Julian situation, I need someone I can trust in that position." "Someone you can trust," Hayden repeated. "After knowing me for less than a month, I'm a good judge of character," Ezra replied. "And you've already proven yourself under pressure." The new role came with a substantial raise, additional lab space, and a small team reporting to her. It represented not just professional advancement but deeper integration into the Bishop organization. "I'll need to see all the import records," Hayden said, already thinking through protocols and verification systems. "Current suppliers, shipping manifestos, customs documentation. You'll have complete access," Ezra assured her. "No restrictions." That promise of transparency, more than the salary or title, convinced Hayden to accept. Within a week, she had a new office adjacent to her lab, a specialized computer system with secured access to the Bishop import databases, and 2 lab assistants vetted by Marcus himself. Scout continued to thrive in the childcare center, now spending his days with 3 other children of Bishop employees. Hayden and he moved into a small but elegant condo 10 minutes from the Palisade, purchased by the Bishop family as executive housing, but effectively hers to use indefinitely. Life developed a comfortable rhythm that occasionally made Hayden forget the unusual circumstances that had brought her here. She woke each morning to Scout's babbling, brought him to the Palisade's childcare center, and spent her days examining import samples, developing verification protocols, and building a comprehensive quality control system that would prevent another contamination attempt. She saw Ezra almost daily now, their professional relationship evolving into something that, while not quite friendship, held a comfortable familiarity. He respected her expertise, valued her opinions, and continued to maintain the careful personal boundaries that had characterized their interactions from the beginning. It was during her 3rd week in the expanded role that Hayden noticed the first discrepancy. She was reviewing import logs for specialty liqueurs from Eastern Europe when a pattern caught her attention. Shipments that arrived monthly but weren't reflected in the Palisade's inventory. The documentation was flawless on the surface. Proper customs forms, health certificates, transport manifests. But the quantities never matched the restaurant's actual stock. Intrigued, Hayden dug deeper, cross-referencing shipping containers, transportation routes, and final delivery confirmations. What she found was a shadow system perfectly documented, meticulously maintained, and completely separate from the Palisade's regular operations. These shipments weren't going to the restaurant at all. They were being diverted to another location, a warehouse in the industrial district listed under a subsidiary company called Bishop Distributors. Hayden sat back in her chair, chewing her lower lip thoughtfully. This could be entirely legitimate, a separate distribution channel for the family's other businesses. Or it could be something else entirely. She debated whether to bring it to Ezra's attention immediately. If this was standard Bishop family business, her questions might suggest suspicion where none was warranted. If it was something more problematic, she might be overstepping boundaries she didn't fully understand. In the end, professional thoroughness won out. She couldn't properly oversee quality control without understanding all distribution channels. She scheduled a meeting with Ezra for the following morning, organizing her findings into a clear, factual presentation. Whatever these shipments contained, she needed to know if they fell under her purview. Ezra's expression remained neutral as Hayden walked him through the discrepancies, pointing out the diverted shipments and shadow inventory system. These deliveries never reached the Palisade, she explained, showing him the comparative manifests. They're redirected to Bishop Distributors, but I can't find any testing protocols or quality controls in place for them. When she finished, Ezra was quiet for a long moment, studying the documentation she'd compiled. "You're remarkably thorough," he said finally. "It's my job to be thorough," Hayden replied. "If these shipments contain consumables, they should be subject to the same verification process as everything else." "They're not consumables," Ezra said carefully. "At least, not in the traditional sense." "Then what are they?" Ezra considered her question, clearly weighing how much to reveal. Bishop Distributors handles specialty imports for clients with specific requirements. The products don't go through the Palisade because they're not related to restaurant operations. "Specific requirements," Hayden repeated. "You mean illegal imports?" "I mean products that operate in regulatory gray areas," Ezra corrected. "Nothing directly harmful. Nothing that would fall under your safety concerns." Hayden crossed her arms. "Then you won't mind if I verify that personally." Something like respect flickered in Ezra's eyes. "Most people wouldn't push this point." "I'm not most people," Hayden replied. "And you hired me to ensure quality and safety across your import channels. I can't do that with blind spots." Ezra considered this, then made a decision. "I'll arrange for you to inspect the warehouse. Tomorrow afternoon. Marcus will accompany you." Hayden nodded, satisfied for now. "Thank you." As she turned to leave, Ezra added, "Hayden." She paused. "The Bishop family businesses exist on a spectrum from fully legitimate to less so. This warehouse falls somewhere in the middle. Be prepared for that." It was the most direct acknowledgement he'd made of the family's criminal activities, a warning and a test of her boundaries. "I understand," she said, and she did better than he might realize. Her years in hospital labs had taught her that the line between legal and illegal was often thinner than most people imagined, especially when it came to controlled substances. The warehouse was in an industrial zone near the river, a nondescript building with minimal signage and robust security. Marcus drove Hayden personally, their conversation during the trip limited to professional small talk. Ezra doesn't bring many people here, Marcus said as they approached the security gate. You're the first in over a year. Hayden glanced at him. Should I be flattered or concerned? Both, probably. Marcus's usually stoic expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, I think he's making the right call. You've proven yourself. The interior of the warehouse was surprisingly organized, climate-controlled storage areas, computerized inventory systems, staff in uniforms moving with professional efficiency. If Hayden hadn't known better, she might have thought it was any legitimate distribution facility. Marcus led her to a secured section at the rear of the building, using both a keycard and biometric scan to gain entry. Inside was a smaller, more tightly controlled storage area with specialized refrigeration units and monitoring systems. This is where the Eastern European shipments are processed, he explained, unlocking one of the refrigeration units. See for yourself. Hayden approached cautiously, unsure what to expect. Inside were rows of carefully packaged vials and ampules, each labeled in multiple languages, organized in specialized transport containers. She picked up one of the vials, examining the labeling. Her medical background allowed her to recognize the contents immediately, a specialized cardiac medication, not approved for use in the United States but widely prescribed in Eastern Europe. Pharmaceutical imports, she said, looking at Marcus. Gray market medications. People need treatments they can't get through traditional channels, Marcus explained. Either because of FDA restrictions, insurance limitations, or cost barriers. We provide access at reasonable prices. Hayden examined more of the inventory. Everything was properly stored, temperature-controlled, and appeared to be legitimate pharmaceutical product, not counterfeits or diluted versions. These were real medications, simply imported through unofficial channels. Who oversees quality control? She asked. How do you verify these aren't contaminated or counterfeit? We have relationships with the source manufacturers, Marcus replied. But no formal testing protocol like what you've established for the Palisade. Hayden nodded, her professional mind already cataloging the potential risks and necessary verification procedures. This wasn't what she'd expected, not narcotics or illegal street drugs, but medications people genuinely needed. Some of these could be dangerous if mishandled, she observed, or if they interact with other treatments. That's why we only distribute through doctors who understand the risks, Marcus explained. Physicians who work with underserved communities, patients without insurance options. It was organized, careful, and arguably more ethical than many legal pharmaceutical operations Hayden had encountered. Still not fully legitimate, but not the criminal enterprise she might have feared. Ezra started this program 3 years ago, Marcus continued, watching her reaction carefully. After his mother died because she couldn't access an experimental treatment the FDA hadn't approved yet. The personal connection surprised Hayden. I didn't know. He doesn't talk about it, Marcus said. But it's why quality matters to him. Why your position exists in the first place. As they continued through the warehouse, Hayden's perspective shifted. The Bishop family operations weren't simply criminal enterprises, they were complex systems filling gaps where legitimate channels failed. Questionable legality, perhaps, but with purpose beyond mere profit. I can implement testing protocols here, she said finally. Random sampling, verification procedures, storage monitoring. Ensure nothing dangerous reaches patients. Marcus nodded. That's what Ezra hoped you'd say. On the drive back to the Palisade, Hayden was quiet, processing everything she'd seen. The Bishop family operated in shadows, yes, but with a structure and ethical framework she hadn't expected. You're thinking very loudly over there, Marcus observed as they neared the city. I'm trying to reconcile the organization I'm seeing with the reputation it has, Hayden admitted. The Bishop family has done things worth that reputation, Marcus replied honestly. But Ezra is changing the direction, legitimizing operations where possible, maintaining ethical standards where not. And the other parts of the business? The parts I haven't seen? Marcus glanced at her. Some questions are better not asked until you're ready for the answers. When they returned to the Palisade, Ezra was waiting in his office, expression carefully neutral as Hayden entered. Your warehouse is impressive, she said without preamble. And your assessment? He asked. You need better quality controls, systematic testing, documentation protocols, storage validation. She handed him a notepad where she'd outlined initial recommendations. I can implement all of this within 2 weeks. Ezra studied her notes, then looked up with an expression she couldn't quite read. Relief, perhaps, or something deeper. You're comfortable with the nature of the operation? He asked directly. I'm a healthcare professional, Ezra. I understand the gap between what patients need and what the system provides. Hayden met his gaze steadily. What you're doing helps people who would otherwise suffer. I can support that, even if the methods aren't entirely by the book. Something shifted in Ezra's expression, a subtle relaxation, as if a question had been answered. Then we move forward, he said simply. As Hayden left his office, she realized the warehouse inspection had been more than a quality control assessment. It had been a test not just of her professional capabilities, but of her moral flexibility, her willingness to see beyond black and white legality to the complex reality of the Bishop family operations. And apparently, she had passed. 3 months passed in a rhythm that had become surprisingly comfortable. Hayden's role expanded from quality control to comprehensive oversight of Bishop family imports, both legitimate and gray market. She developed testing protocols for the pharmaceutical program, implemented safety standards, and built verification systems that ensured nothing dangerous or counterfeit entered their distribution channels. Scout thrived in the childcare center, now walking confidently and stringing together simple words. Hayden herself had transformed professionally confident again, financially stable, and gradually adjusting to the complex moral balance required by her position within the Bishop organization. Her relationship with Ezra had evolved too. Their professional interactions maintained appropriate boundaries, but a quiet trust had developed between them. He respected her expertise, valued her judgment, and increasingly shared more information about the family businesses. It was a Tuesday morning when everything changed. Hayden was in the lab, analyzing a shipment of Taiwanese whiskey, when Marcus appeared at the door. His expression, always controlled, was unusually tight. "Ezra needs you," he said without preamble. Now, she followed him to Ezra's office, where Raymond and Vivian were already gathered. The tension in the room was palpable. "What's happened?" Hayden asked, scanning their grim expressions. Ezra stood at the window, his back to the room. Julian Hayes was released yesterday. Insufficient evidence, according to the prosecutor's office. Hayden's stomach dropped. "How?" "We had proof of the contamination, the financial irregularities." "Someone got to the prosecutor," Raymond interrupted, his voice tired. "Made the evidence disappear. Witnesses recant. The kind of legal magic that only happens with serious influence or serious money. Likely both. This morning," Ezra continued, turning to face them, "2 of our pharmaceutical shipments were seized by the FDA. An anonymous tip, apparently. The implications were clear. Julian was retaliating, using his connections to attack the Bishop family interests. That's not all," Vivian added grimly. "Our bank accounts have been flagged for suspicious activity. Merchant services for the Palisade are under review, and 3 city health inspectors arrived unannounced at the restaurant an hour ago. Coordinated assault," Marcus summarized. "Financial, legal, regulatory. Julian's hitting every pressure point simultaneously." "How bad is it?" Hayden asked, processing the cascade of threats. "Bad," Raymond said flatly. "Julian knows our operations intimately. 3 years as financial advisor gave him access to vulnerabilities most outsiders would never see. Can we counter?" Hayden directed the question to Ezra, who had remained unnaturally still throughout the exchange. "We're already taking measures," he replied, his voice controlled, but with an edge she rarely heard. "But Julian isn't working alone. He has backing, powerful backing. The Mercer family," Raymond explained, noting Hayden's questioning look. "Old money, political connections stretching back generations. Julian's wife is a Mercer, and they've clearly decided the Bishop family has outlived its usefulness in Crescent Falls," Vivian concluded. The room fell silent as the full weight of the situation settled. This wasn't just a disgruntled ex-employee seeking revenge. It was a calculated power play by forces with the means and influence to potentially dismantle everything the Bishop family had built. "What do you need from me?" Hayden asked finally, her practical nature asserting itself. Ezra studied her for a moment. "Your records on the pharmaceutical program, the quality control protocols, testing documentation, safety standards, everything that proves it's a legitimate medical operation, not a narcotics distribution channel." Hayden nodded. "I have comprehensive files. Clean, professional, detailed. I can have them organized within the hour." "Good," Ezra said. "That's our most vulnerable point right now. If Julian convinces the authorities it's a drug operation rather than a compassionate care program, we lose everything." As the others discussed immediate countermeasures, Hayden's phone buzzed with a text from Helen. "Is Scout staying late today? Wanted to plan dinner for the children." Reality crashed back in. Scout, her son, the innocent child who had no place in this world of power struggles and retribution. Ezra, she interrupted the ongoing strategy discussion. If Julian knows your operations this well, he knows about me, doesn't he? About my role? The silence that followed confirmed her fears. We've already increased security at the childcare center, Marcus assured her. Additional personnel, enhanced protocols. But Hayden had worked in the Bishop organization long enough to recognize when something wasn't being said. What aren't you telling me? She pressed. Ezra exchanged a look with Raymond, then sighed. This morning, a man matching Julian's description was observed watching the childcare center drop-offs. When security approached, he left. Ice formed in Hayden's stomach. He was watching for Scout. We don't know that for certain, Vivian began, but Hayden cut her off. Yes, we do. I helped build the case against him. I provided the evidence that would have put him away. Of course, he'd target me. Target Scout as part of his retaliation. The room fell silent again, her words hanging in the air like a prophecy. I want Scout moved to a secure location, Ezra said finally. Along with Hayden. Marcus, arrange it. No, Hayden said firmly, surprising everyone including herself. I'm not running. Not when you need the documentation I've built. I'll send Scout somewhere safe. But I'm staying. Ezra studied her, something complex moving behind his eyes. This isn't your fight, Hayden. It became my fight the moment Julian decided to threaten my son. Her voice was steady, certain. I have a proposal. My friend Delia, she's not connected to any of this. Julian wouldn't know her. She can take Scout to her sister's cabin upstate until this is resolved. And you? Ezra asked quietly. I'll stay and help you fight back. She met his gaze directly. You need my records, my testimony, my expertise. And I need to make sure Julian Hayes never comes near my son again. The conviction in her voice seemed to resonate with everyone in the room. Even Raymond, typically skeptical of outsiders, gave a small nod of approval. Arrange it, Ezra told Marcus. Full security detail for the friend and Scout. Untraceable route to the cabin. Regular check-ins. As the meeting concluded with assignments distributed, Ezra asked Hayden to remain behind. When they were alone, his carefully maintained composure softened slightly. You don't have to do this, he said. No one would blame you for protecting your child first. I am protecting him first, Hayden replied. By making sure the people who would use him as leverage are stopped, permanently. Ezra studied her, something shifting in his expression. When you accidentally texted me that night, I never imagined you'd become this important to the organization. To the organization, Hayden repeated, hearing what wasn't being said. Is that all? The question hung between them, weighted with months of carefully maintained professional boundaries and growing personal connection. No, Ezra admitted quietly. Not all. Before either could elaborate, Marcus returned with security details, and the moment passed. But something had changed, an acknowledgement that whatever existed between them had evolved beyond employer and employee, beyond even allies against a common threat. Saying goodbye to Scout was the hardest thing Hayden had ever done. At 18 months old, he couldn't understand why he was leaving with Delia, why his mother was staying behind. His confused tears nearly broke her resolve. It's just for a little while, buddy, she whispered, hugging him close. Mama has to finish something important, and then I'll come get you. Delia, bless her, asked no questions when Hayden explained the situation as a security concern related to my work. She simply packed her car, accepted the 2 security men Marcus assigned as escorts, and promised to keep Scout safe until Hayden could retrieve him. After they left, Hayden threw herself into the work with single-minded focus. She compiled comprehensive documentation on the pharmaceutical program research papers supporting the medical necessity of the imported medications, testimonials from physicians anonymized for their protection, quality control procedures, safety protocols. She built a narrative that transformed a gray market operation into a compassionate care program for underserved patients. This is impressive, Raymond commented, reviewing her files. Professional, medical, ethical. It makes the program look like a non-profit healthcare initiative rather than an import scheme. That's because it essentially is, Hayden replied, surprising herself with her conviction. The medications are legitimate. The need is real. The only crime is bypassing a regulatory system that prioritizes profit over patient care. Raymond studied her with new respect. You've come a long way from the woman who accidentally texted Ezra 3 months ago. Circumstances change people, Hayden said simply. Sometimes for the better. She worked through the night, preparing for the FDA investigation they knew would come. By morning, Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but her documentation was flawless, medical, ethical, detailed. If the pharmaceutical program faced scrutiny, they now had a compelling defense. Ezra found her in the lab at dawn, staring at her phone at a photo of Scout Delia had sent to reassure her. "You should rest," he said, setting a coffee beside her. "So should you," she countered, noting the weariness in his face. He conceded with a slight nod. Julian's made his next move. Health Department citation against the Palisade. Alleged contamination in our water supply. That's ridiculous. I test the water systems weekly. Facts don't matter in this game, Hayden. Only perception. Julian's creating a narrative criminal organization endangering public health. She understood then why her documentation mattered so much. It wasn't just about legal defense. It was about counter-narrative ethical business practices, safety protocols, rigorous standards. "We're hitting back," Ezra continued. "Vivian's meeting with our attorneys. Marcus is securing our vulnerable locations. Raymond is activating old contacts. And you?" Hayden asked. "I'm meeting with someone who might be able to end this. Tonight." He hesitated. "I'd like you to come with me." "Why?" "Because your perspective matters. Because you bring credibility we need. Because," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "I trust your judgment in ways I trust few others." The admission hung between them, significant and weighted. "When do we leave?" Hayden asked. 8:00. Dress professionally. This meeting requires a certain presentation. She wanted to ask more questions, but exhaustion was catching up with her. Ezra saw it in her face. "Rest," he said again, more firmly this time. "Use the apartment upstairs. I need you sharp tonight." Too tired to argue, Hayden nodded. As she gathered her things, Ezra spoke again. "Hayden." She looked up. "Thank you. For staying. For helping. It would have been easier to leave with Scout." "Easier isn't always right," she replied simply. "You taught me that." As she made her way to the apartment, Hayden reflected on how profoundly her life had changed in 3 short months. From desperate single mother to key player in a power struggle between criminal organizations. From texting a wrong number for formula money to standing beside Ezra Bishop in what might be the fight for his family's survival. The strangest part was how right it felt, as if every experience in her life, from her medical training to her struggle as a single mother, had been preparing her for precisely this moment, this challenge, this alliance. She fell asleep wondering what the mysterious meeting that night would bring, and why, despite everything, she felt safer at Ezra Bishop's side than anywhere else. The car ride that evening was silent, tension hanging in the air like a physical presence. Hayden sat beside Ezra in the back of a sleek black SUV, Marcus driving, the city lights playing across their faces as they moved through Crescent Falls. She'd dressed as instructed, a charcoal pantsuit borrowed from Vivian, her hair neatly styled, makeup subtle but professional. Ezra wore a tailored suit, his expression unreadable. "Where are we going?" she finally asked as they crossed into the city's affluent north side. "To see Judge Carmichael," Ezra replied, his voice controlled. "Senior Circuit Court Judge. Family friend." "Friend to the Bishop family?" Hayden couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. "Friend to my father," Ezra clarified. "And a man who believes in balance. He's maintained a certain equilibrium in Crescent Falls for decades." Hayden processed this. "You think he can stop Julian?" "I think he can stop the Mercers from backing Julian. Without their influence, he's just one man with a grudge." The car turned into a gated community of estate homes set back from the street behind mature trees and manicured lawns. They pulled up to a colonial-style mansion, its windows glowing warmly against the night. "Let me do the talking," Ezra said as they approached the front door. "At least initially. Judge Carmichael is old school, respects hierarchy." A housekeeper admitted them into a home that exuded old money, antique furniture, oil paintings, Persian rugs. They were led to a wood-paneled study where an elderly man rose from behind a desk that probably predated the Civil War. Judge Carmichael was in his 70s, white-haired but still vigorous, with sharp eyes that assessed them both with immediate intelligence. "Ezra," he greeted, his voice carrying the cultured accent of old Southern wealth. "It's been too long." "Judge," Ezra replied respectfully. "Thank you for seeing us on short notice." The judge's gaze shifted to Hayden, curious but not unfriendly. "And this must be Miss Knox, your new quality control specialist." The precise description confirmed what Hayden had suspected. The judge was well informed about Bishop family operations. "A pleasure, sir," she said, shaking his offered hand. "Please, sit." The judge gestured to leather chairs arranged near a fireplace where flames crackled despite the mild evening. Bourbon? After pouring 3 glasses, the judge settled into his chair. Now, Ezra, tell me about this unfortunate situation with Julian Hayes. For the next 20 minutes, Ezra outlined the situation, Julian's embezzlement, the contamination plot, his release, and subsequent assault on Bishop family interests. He presented the facts dispassionately, like a lawyer arguing a case. The judge listened without interruption, occasionally sipping his bourbon. When Ezra finished, he turned to Hayden. And you, Miss Knox, how did a hospital toxicologist come to be involved in this complicated situation? The question caught her off guard. The truth, please, the judge added, his tone gentle but firm. I've found it saves considerable time. Hayden glanced at Ezra, who nodded slightly. I texted Mr. Bishop by accident, she admitted. I was trying to reach my brother for help buying formula for my son. I sent the message to the wrong number. The judge's eyebrows rose. And Ezra responded, yes. He sent money for formula, then baby supplies, then offered me a job using my toxicology background. Interesting. The judge studied her. In 30 years of knowing the Bishop family, I've never seen such spontaneous generosity. It wasn't charity, Ezra interjected. Miss Knox has exceptional qualifications. Her expertise has proven invaluable. I'm sure it has, the judge replied, a knowing undertone in his voice. Particularly regarding the pharmaceutical program, he turned back to Hayden. What do you think of that program, Miss Knox? As a medical professional, Hayden considered her answer carefully. I think it provides essential medications to people who would otherwise suffer or die without them. The methods may not be FDA approved, but the outcomes are ethically sound. You believe the ends justify the means? I believe systems that prioritize profit over patient care sometimes require alternative solutions, Hayden replied, holding his gaze. The Bishop Pharmaceutical Program maintains rigorous quality controls, safety standards, and medical oversight. It's not perfect, but it helps people who have been abandoned by traditional healthcare. The judge studied her for a long moment, then smiled slightly. Eloquently put. He turned to Ezra. She's quite an asset, isn't she? Beyond measure, Ezra agreed, his voice carrying a warmth Hayden rarely heard. Judge Carmichael set down his glass and leaned forward. Now, about Julian Hayes and the Mercer family. Their actions represent a significant disruption to the balance we've maintained in this city for generations. That's putting it mildly, Ezra replied. They're attempting a complete takeover of Bishop interests. Yes, well, the judge sighed. The younger Mercers lack their father's understanding of equilibrium. They see your family's operations as outdated, your methods as inefficient, and Julian has convinced them he can do better, Hayden deduced. Precisely, Miss Knox. The judge nodded approvingly. Julian promises modern efficiency, technological oversight, expanded profits, very appealing to a family whose wealth has been stagnating. Can you intervene? Ezra asked directly. The judge considered this. I have certain influence with the senior Mercer, and I find this vendetta distasteful. It threatens stability throughout the region. He paused. However, my intervention comes with conditions. Name them, Ezra said without hesitation. The pharmaceutical program must be legitimized. Not necessarily FDA approved, but structured through proper channels. Legal frameworks exist for compassionate use programs. Ezra nodded. Vivian has already begun exploring those options. Good. Second, the more traditional aspects of Bishop family business must continue their evolution toward legitimate enterprise. Your father understood this necessity. You must accelerate it. Already in progress, Ezra confirmed. We've been transitioning operations for 3 years. And finally, the judge said, his gaze moving between them, the Julian Hayes situation must be resolved without public bloodshed. The old methods are no longer tenable in Crescent Falls. They attract unwanted attention from federal authorities. The implication was clear-handled Julian, but do it quietly, cleanly, without the kind of violence that had characterized previous generations of Bishop family conflict resolution. I understand, Ezra said simply. The judge stood, signaling the end of the meeting. I'll speak with Charles Mercer tomorrow. You should see the regulatory pressure ease within 48 hours. The rest, he shrugged, is in your capable hands. As they prepared to leave, Judge Carmichael took Hayden's hand. Miss Knox, a pleasure meeting you. I suspect you've brought more than just professional expertise to the Bishop organization. The perceptiveness of the observation left her momentarily speechless. Back in the car, Ezra was quiet, processing the meeting. Finally, he spoke. "That went better than expected," he said. "Judge Carmichael rarely commits to direct intervention. He respects you," Hayden observed. "Or at least he respects what you're trying to do with the family business." Ezra glanced at her. "He was more impressed with you, I think." Before she could respond, Marcus's voice came from the front seat. "We've got company. Black sedan, 2 cars back. Been with us since we left the judge's neighborhood." Ezra tensed, immediately alert. "Julian? Can't confirm," Marcus replied, his voice professionally calm. "But timing suggests it's related." Hayden instinctively looked back, but Ezra placed a hand on her arm. "Don't. Act normal. Marcus, alternate route." The SUV smoothly changed lanes, then turned onto a less traveled street. The sedan followed. "Definitely a tail," Marcus confirmed. "Options? Safe house on Riverside," Ezra decided. "We can secure it quickly." Hayden's heart raced, the reality of the danger suddenly concrete in a way it hadn't been before. This wasn't abstract business conflict anymore, it was physical threat, immediate and real. "They're closing," Marcus warned, accelerating slightly. Second vehicle joined from the cross street. Professional driving pattern. "How far to Riverside?" Ezra asked, his voice controlled despite the tension. 10 minutes. Too long if they're planning an intercept. Hayden watched Ezra make a quick calculation. The warehouse. 5 minutes. Secured perimeter. Armed personnel already on site. Marcus nodded, executing a sharp turn that momentarily shook off their pursuers. "Calling ahead now." Ezra turned to Hayden, his expression grave but composed. "I'm sorry you're involved in this. It wasn't what I intended when I offered you the position." "Pretty sure car chase with hostile pursuers wasn't in the job description," she agreed, attempting humor despite her racing pulse. His hand found hers in the darkness of the back seat, his grip warm and steady. "Whatever happens, stay with me. I won't let anything happen to you." The promise held an intensity that transcended professional protection. Hayden squeezed his hand in acknowledgement, surprising herself with how natural the contact felt. "They're making a move," Marcus warned, his voice tight as he executed another turn. "Trying to box us in." The black sedan had reappeared, now joined by a dark SUV similar to their own. The 2 vehicles were maneuvering to trap them at the upcoming intersection. "Hold on," Marcus advised, then abruptly accelerated, cutting across 2 lanes of traffic and down a service alley barely wide enough for their vehicle. Hayden gripped the door handle as they bounced over uneven pavement, the powerful SUV handling the rough terrain with surprising agility. Behind them, she heard the screech of brakes as their pursuers attempted to follow. "We've got a gap," Marcus reported. "Warehouse is 2 minutes out," security team alerted. Ezra hadn't released her hand. "Almost there," he assured her. "The warehouse is secure." When they finally turned into the industrial complex that housed the Bishop pharmaceutical operation, armed security personnel were already positioned at the entrance. Marcus drove directly into the loading bay, where the heavy doors rolled shut behind them immediately. "Clear," announced the security chief, a former military man Hayden recognized from previous visits. "No pursuit vehicles visible. We've secured the perimeter." Inside the warehouse office, Ezra immediately went into action mode, conferring with security, checking surveillance feeds, issuing directives for enhanced protocols. Hayden watched him work, struck by the efficiency with which he managed the crisis. No panic, no wasted energy, just focused response. When he finally returned to her side, his expression was grim. "This is escalating faster than I anticipated. The attempt to intercept us directly after meeting with Judge Carmichael suggests Julian has surveillance on the judge's home, which means he knows you're seeking intervention," Hayden concluded. "He's getting desperate." "Desperate people are the most dangerous," Ezra agreed. "We need to move quickly now. End this before someone gets hurt." The implication hung between them, someone like her. "What's our next move?" she asked, deliberately using our rather than your. Ezra noticed the pronoun choice, his expression softening momentarily. "First, we get you somewhere safe. The warehouse apartment is secure, monitored, and has everything you need. And then I deal with Julian, permanently." His voice had hardened, the brief softness replaced by cold determination. "Ezra," Hayden said carefully. "Judge Carmichael was specific about avoiding public violence. There are other ways to neutralize threats, Hayden." He met her gaze directly. "Ways that leave no trace, cause no scandal, attract no federal attention." The toxicologist in her immediately understood what he wasn't saying: chemical solutions, untraceable compounds. The kind of methods that left no evidence for authorities to find. You'd need someone with expertise in such compounds, she said slowly. Someone who understands dosages, delivery methods, elimination, half-lives. I would, he agreed, watching her carefully. The moment stretched between them a crossroads. A test, a point of no return. Hayden knew what he was asking, knew the moral boundary it represented. This wasn't quality testing or pharmaceutical verification. This was direct involvement in eliminating a threat potentially lethally. I need to check on Scout, she said instead of answering directly. Make sure he's still safe. Ezra nodded, accepting the deflection. Of course. Use the secure line in the office. I'll give you privacy. Alone? Hayden called Delia's number with trembling fingers. Her friend answered immediately. We're fine, Delia assured her before she could even ask. Scout's asleep. Your security consultants are very thorough. Nobody's getting within a mile of this cabin without them knowing. Relief washed through Hayden. Thank you, Delia. I owe you more than I can ever repay. Just be careful, Hayden, her friend replied, concern evident in her voice. Whatever you're involved in, it's bigger than you told me, isn't it? Yes, Hayden admitted. But I'm okay. I'm with people who will protect me. After ending the call, she stood in the quiet office, facing the decision Ezra had placed before her. She thought about Scout, safe but separated from her. About Julian Hayes, who had tried to poison customers and was now pursuing her directly. About Ezra Bishop, who had changed her life with a single text response and now offered her a role in changing his. When she emerged from the office, her decision made, Ezra was waiting. Scout is safe, she told him. Now let's make sure he stays that way. Ezra studied her face, recognizing her resolved expression. You understand what you're agreeing to? I'm a toxicologist, Ezra. I understand better than most. She met his gaze steadily. Julian Hayes threatened my son. He tried to have us run off the road tonight. This isn't about business anymore. It's about survival. Something like respect or perhaps something deeper flashed in Ezra's eyes. Then we move forward, he said simply. Together. The word hung between them, weighted with implications that extended far beyond the immediate crisis. Whatever happened next would irrevocably change both their lives and the bond forming between them. The warehouse apartment was sparse but functional, a studio layout with reinforced doors and windows, stocked with essentials and equipped with secure communication systems. Hayden sat at the small desk, her laptop open to chemical formulation software she hadn't used since her hospital days. It was 3 a.m. Ezra had left 2 hours earlier after establishing a secure protocol for their next steps. The plan was precise, methodical, requiring her expertise in ways that crossed professional and ethical boundaries she'd once considered immovable. Yet here she was, designing a compound that would neutralize Julian Hayes without leaving evidence. A toxin that would mimic natural cardiac failure, metabolize completely within hours, and leave no trace for even the most thorough autopsy. The science was fascinating, even as the purpose troubled her. She'd taken an oath as a healthcare professional to do no harm, but she'd also promised to protect Scout, and Julian had made it clear he considered her son a viable target in his vendetta against the Bishop family. Her phone buzzed with a message from Ezra. Situation developing. Raymond discovered additional accounts. Julian's operation larger than anticipated. Before she could respond, a second message arrived. Meeting with Raymond at 7 a.m. Rest if you can. Hayden pushed away from the desk, stretching muscles stiff from hours of concentration. Sleep seemed impossible with her mind racing through molecular structures and ethical implications. Instead, she moved to the window, peering through reinforced blinds at the warehouse floor below. The pharmaceutical operation continued even at this hour, workers cataloging shipments, preparing distributions for the morning deliveries to partner physicians. The legitimacy of the work struck her again. Whatever else the Bishop family did, this program helped people who had been abandoned by traditional healthcare systems. Her phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't Ezra. It was Delia. Need to talk as soon as possible. Use the emergency number they gave me. Call when you can. Alarm shot through Hayden. She immediately dialed the secure line to the cabin. What's wrong? She demanded when Delia answered. Is Scout okay? He's fine, Delia assured her quickly. Sleeping. But someone came by the cabin earlier, a woman claiming to be from Child Services, asking questions about Scout's custody situation. Hayden's blood ran cold. What did she look like? 40-ish, blonde, expensive suit. Your security guys intercepted her before she got close, but she left a business card. Hayden, it said Mercer Family Foundation. Everything clicked into place. Julian wasn't just using the Mercers for business leverage, he was deploying their philanthropic foundation as cover for locating Scout. Did she leave? What did the security team do? They escorted her off the property, very politely but very firmly. One of them has been on the phone ever since, speaking with someone named Marcus. Marcus would handle it properly, Hayden knew. But the attempt itself was telling Julian was escalating, targeting multiple fronts simultaneously. "Delia, listen to me carefully," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Don't open the door for anyone, even if they have official ID. The security team will verify all visitors. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, use the panic button they showed you." After reassuring Delia and checking that the security protocols remained intact, Hayden ended the call and immediately dialed Marcus. "I already know," he said before she could speak. "Security has been doubled at the cabin. We're running background on the woman now, but preliminary checks confirm Mercer Foundation employment." "This is getting worse," Hayden said. "They're using child welfare as a weapon now." "It's a common tactic," Marcus replied, his voice grim. "Target family, create leverage. But we anticipated this possibility. The security team has documentation showing you have proper care arrangements for Scout during a work emergency." After ending the call, Hayden returned to her laptop with renewed purpose. The threat to Scout had crystallized her resolve. Julian Hayes wasn't just a business rival or a disgruntled ex-employee, he was actively endangering her child. She worked until dawn, refining the compound formula, running simulations, calculating dosages. When she finally closed the laptop, she had designed something that met all requirements: effective, untraceable, impossible to detect without knowing exactly what to look for. At 6:45 a.m., she secured her work and prepared to meet Ezra and Raymond. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror showed a woman she barely recognized, determined, focused, with none of the desperation that had characterized her life just months earlier. She had become someone new in the Bishop organization, not just a toxicologist or quality control specialist, but a partner in operations that existed beyond conventional morality. The transformation should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like finally acknowledging a part of herself that had always existed beneath the surface: pragmatic, resourceful, capable of crossing lines when necessary to protect what mattered. The meeting with Raymond revealed complexities that changed everything. Julian's financial manipulations extended far beyond what they'd initially discovered: shell companies, offshore accounts, a network of transactions designed to siphon Bishop family assets while simultaneously creating evidence of criminal activity. "He's been planning this for years," Raymond explained, spreading financial documents across the conference table, setting up breadcrumb trails that lead to Ezra, while hiding his own involvement. "The goal isn't just to take over Bishop businesses," Ezra added. "It's to ensure I'm unable to fight back, tied up in criminal investigations, asset forfeitures, regulatory violations." Hayden studied the documents, her analytical mind catching patterns the others might have missed. "These transactions," she said, pointing to a series of transfers, "they're all routed through the same processing system. Recurring patterns, identical timing. That's a vulnerability." Raymond's eyebrows rose. "How so?" "Electronic fingerprints," Hayden explained. "Every system leaves them timestamps, routing markers, authentication protocols. If Julian used the same method repeatedly, there's a digital trail linking him directly to the transactions." "Can we trace it?" Ezra asked. "Not me personally," Hayden admitted, "but someone with the right cybersecurity background could follow these patterns back to their source. Prove Julian's direct involvement." Raymond and Ezra exchanged looks. "We know someone," Ezra said. "Former NSA analyst who occasionally consults for us on digital security." "If we can prove Julian set up the false trails," Raymond added, "we undermine his entire strategy. And provide evidence for the authorities that would actually stick," Hayden concluded. The realization shifted the dynamic of their response. Instead of eliminating Julian directly, the solution Hayden had spent the night designing, they could destroy him legally, using his own methods against him. As Raymond left to contact the cybersecurity specialist, Ezra turned to Hayden. "You found an angle we missed," he said, something like admiration in his voice. "Financial patterns most people wouldn't notice." "I spent months tracking formula sales at Northwest Regional," Hayden replied with a small smile. "You develop an eye for numerical inconsistencies." Ezra studied her for a moment. "The compound you designed last night, we may not need it now." "We may not," she agreed, holding his gaze. "But I'm not sorry I created it. I needed to know we had options if Julian came after Scout again." Understanding passed between them, an acknowledgement that certain lines had already been crossed in intention, if not in action. The Mercer Foundation woman at the cabin, Ezra said, changing the subject. That's concerning. It suggests Julian has more influence with the family than we realized. Or he's acting without their full knowledge, Hayden suggested. Using their resources for personal vendetta. The possibility hung between them, a potential wedge they could drive between Julian and his powerful backers. I need to check something, Hayden said suddenly, an idea forming. The pharmaceutical program records customer lists, distribution patterns. Julian would have had access to those too, right? Basic overviews, yes, Ezra confirmed. Why? Because if he's targeting every aspect of Bishop operations, he might use that information too. Try to paint it as a narcotics operation instead of a compassionate care program. Ezra's expression darkened. The medications go to legitimate patients through partner physicians. Julian knows that. Yes, but what if he's identified vulnerable points in that network? Physicians who might be pressured, patients who could be approached. Hayden was already moving toward the door. I need to review the distribution records. Look for patterns Julian might exploit. I'll come with you, Ezra said, but Hayden shook her head. You need to meet with the cybersecurity specialist. I can handle this. It's my area of expertise. For a moment, he looked like he might argue, but then nodded. Take Marcus with you. After the cabin incident, I don't want you alone. Back in her lab, Hayden dove into the pharmaceutical program records, analyzing distribution patterns, physician partnerships, patient demographics. Marcus stood near the door, a silent but reassuring presence. 3 hours into her investigation, she found it a statistical anomaly in the patient distribution list. 5 physicians in the same medical complex, all receiving significantly higher volumes of cardiac medications than their patient loads would justify. This doesn't make sense, she muttered, pulling up additional data. These doctors collectively prescribe 30% of our imported cardiac medications, but their registered practices couldn't possibly have that many cardiac patients. Could be legitimate, Marcus suggested from his position by the door. Specialists tend to cluster. No, something's wrong, Hayden insisted, digging deeper into the records. The verification documentation is perfect, too perfect. Identical formatting, sequential patient ID numbers, standardized diagnostic codes. She sat back, realization dawning. It's fabricated. These aren't real patients. Someone created a phantom medical practice within our distribution network. Julian? Marcus asked, now fully engaged. It has to be, Hayden replied, pulling up more files. He set up a shadow operation within the pharmaceutical program, legitimate looking on paper, but actually diverting medications elsewhere. Where? That's what we need to find out. Working with renewed urgency, Hayden traced the medication shipments, cross-referencing delivery confirmations, driver logs, and inventory records. The pattern emerged slowly but unmistakably, a secondary distribution channel, hidden within the legitimate program, redirecting medications to an unmarked facility on the outskirts of Crescent Falls. I need to see this place, Hayden said, gathering the evidence she'd compiled. If Julian's running a parallel operation using diverted medications, it could destroy the entire pharmaceutical program. We should call Ezra first, Marcus cautioned. He's meeting with the cybersecurity specialist, Hayden reminded him. And this can't wait. If Julian is building evidence against the Bishop family using diverted medications, we need to know what we're dealing with. Marcus hesitated, training and loyalty warring with the logic of her argument. Reconnaissance only, he finally conceded. We look, we document, we report back. No engagement. Agreed, Hayden said, already grabbing her coat. Just intelligence gathering. The facility was unimpressive from the outside, a nondescript commercial building with minimal signage indicating a medical supply company. They parked a block away, using high-powered binoculars to observe the loading dock where a single van was being unloaded. That's one of our delivery vehicles, Marcus confirmed, his voice tight. Supposed to be delivering to Riverside Medical Group today. Instead it's here, Hayden murmured, focusing the binoculars on the boxes being transferred. Those are our pharmaceutical shipments, being diverted to whatever this place is. As they watched, a sleek black car pulled up to the facility. A familiar figure emerged, Julian Hayes, dressed impeccably in a business suit, accompanied by 2 men with the unmistakable bearing of private security. There he is, Marcus said quietly, confirming his involvement personally. Hayden adjusted the binoculars, focusing on Julian as he supervised the unloading. We need to get closer, see what's happening inside. Too risky, Marcus replied immediately. Julian has security. We're outnumbered. There's a coffee shop across the street, Hayden pointed out. Perfect observation point with a clear view of the entrance. We can monitor who goes in and out, maybe get a better understanding of the operation. Marcus considered this, then nodded reluctantly. 20 minutes maximum. If Julian spots us, we leave immediately. The coffee shop provided the perfect vantage point. Over the next 15 minutes, they observed a steady stream of people entering the facility, not patients seeking medication, but individuals who appeared to be making purchases and leaving quickly with small packages. It's a distribution point, Marcus realized. They're selling the medications. Not to patients who need them, Hayden added grimly. To anyone willing to pay. As they watched, Julian emerged from the building, checking his watch before walking toward his car. Hayden's instinct flared. I need a closer look, she said suddenly, standing. While Julian's outside, I might be able to see more from the alley behind the building. Absolutely not, Marcus objected. Too dangerous. He's leaving, Hayden insisted. This might be our only chance to gather concrete evidence of what he's doing with the diverted medications. Before Marcus could stop her, she was moving toward the door, slipping out of the coffee shop and circling around to the alley that ran behind the row of commercial buildings. The service entrance to the facility was partially open, a delivery in progress, creating an opportunity she couldn't ignore. Staying close to the wall, phone camera ready, Hayden edged closer. Through the gap in the door, she could see inside, not a medical facility at all, but what appeared to be a packaging operation. Workers were removing medications from their original containers, repackaging them in unmarked bottles, and sorting them into distribution batches. Hayden took several photos, careful to capture the original pharmaceutical packaging that clearly showed Bishop Distributors' labels. This wasn't just diversion, it was a full counterfeiting operation, stripping the medications of their tracking information before reselling them. She was so focused on documenting the scene that she didn't notice the security guard until he spoke directly behind her. You lost, lady? Hayden froze, then slowly turned to face a tall man in a black tactical uniform, his hand resting meaningfully on his holstered weapon. Just taking a shortcut, she said, attempting a casual tone. Is this not a public alley? The guard's eyes narrowed. Let's see some ID. I don't think that's necessary, she replied, already calculating escape routes. I'll just go back the way I came. ID, he repeated more firmly. Now. As she reluctantly reached for her purse, a familiar voice called from the service entrance. Well, Miss Hayden Knox. Julian Hayes stepped into the alley, immaculately dressed but with cold calculation in his eyes. Ezra's newest pet project. How interesting to find you snooping around my business. Hayden's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. Just passing through, Mr. Hayes. With a camera actively taking photos, Julian smiled without warmth. I don't think so. He gestured to the guard. Bring her inside, quietly. I believe Miss Knox and I have some matters to discuss. The guard moved toward her, but before he could reach her, a sharp voice cut through the alley. Touch her and it's the last thing you'll do. Marcus stood at the alley entrance, his weapon drawn and aimed steadily at the security guard. Despite being outnumbered, his military bearing and absolute focus made it clear he wasn't bluffing. Julian's smile tightened. Mr. Cole, Ezra's faithful watchdog, this is becoming quite the reunion. Hayden, walk toward me, Marcus directed, never taking his eyes off Julian and the guard. Slowly, she began moving, maintaining a calm pace despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Julian watched with calculated amusement. Running back to Ezra won't save either of you, he called after her. I have everything I need now. By tomorrow, the Bishop Pharmaceutical Program will be exposed as a criminal enterprise, with documented evidence of illegal distribution, patient exploitation, and medication tampering. Hayden paused, turning back to face him. You created that evidence yourself, she said, holding up her phone. And I just documented you doing it. For the first time, Julian's composure slipped, his eyes widening slightly. You won't make it out of Crescent Falls with that phone, he warned, voice hardening. I guarantee it. We already have, Marcus replied, a slight smile touching his lips. Cloud upload, automatic. Those photos are already being analyzed by our team. It was a bluff, but Julian couldn't know that. Uncertainty flashed across his face before his mask of control returned. This isn't over, he said simply. No, Hayden agreed. It's just beginning. As she reached Marcus's side, he backed them carefully out of the alley, weapon still trained on Julian and his security. Only when they were safely in their vehicle, pulling away from the area, did Hayden's composed facade crack. That was foolish, Marcus said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "You could have been killed." "But I wasn't," she replied, hands shaking slightly as she connected her phone to send the photos to Ezra. "And now we have proof of what Julian's doing, using diverted medications to create a shadow operation he can expose when it serves his purposes." Marcus glanced at her, professional disapproval warring with reluctant respect. "You took an unnecessary risk." "I made a judgment call," Hayden corrected. "And it paid off." As they drove back to the Palisade, Hayden realized what she had done, confronted Julian directly, gathered crucial evidence, acted independently within the Bishop organization's interests. She was no longer just an employee or even an ally. She had become an active participant in this world of power, risk, and calculated moves. And strangest of all, it felt right, like she had finally found her place in a world that recognized her value and allowed her to use all her capabilities, not just the ones that fit within conventional boundaries. By the time they reached the Palisade, Ezra was waiting, his expression a complex mixture of relief, concern, and something deeper that made Hayden's heart beat faster. "You could have been killed," he said without preamble as she entered his office. "That seems to be the consensus," she replied, setting her phone on his desk. "But I wasn't, and I got what we needed." Ezra's office hummed with tense energy. Raymond and Vivian had joined them, along with the cybersecurity specialist, a soft-spoken woman introduced only as Ellis, who had been analyzing Hayden's photos alongside the financial evidence they'd gathered. "Julian's created a perfect trap," Ellis explained, gesturing to the screens where she'd compiled their findings. "The diverted medications, the repackaging operation, the shadow distribution network, all designed to appear as if it's a Bishop family enterprise gone rogue. Meanwhile, he's created a financial trail that, on surface examination, implicates Ezra directly. But we can prove he's behind it," Hayden interjected. "The photos show him personally supervising the operation." "Photos can be disputed, contexts questioned," Raymond cautioned. "We need more definitive evidence." Ellis nodded. "That's where the digital trail becomes crucial." Julian used the same encryption protocols, the same server bounces, for both his legitimate work with the Bishop family and his shadow operation. There are unmistakable electronic fingerprints linking him to the diverted funds and medications. "So we have a defense," Vivian summarized. "But we need an offense, a way to neutralize Julian permanently." "We have that too," Ezra said quietly. All eyes turned to him. "Judge Carmichael called an hour ago. His conversation with Charles Mercer was productive. The Mercer family is reconsidering their alliance with Julian." "On what grounds?" Raymond asked. "The Foundation's attempt to locate Scout," Ezra replied, his gaze meeting Hayden's. "Judge Carmichael made it clear that using a family charitable organization to target a child crossed a line the Mercers wouldn't want associated with their name." Hayden felt a wave of relief. "So they're backing away from Julian?" "Conditionally," Ezra confirmed. "They want proof that he acted without their authorization, used their resources without full disclosure." Ellis raised a hand. "I may have that proof." Julian's emails to the Foundation staff regarding the child welfare check were sent from the same secured server he used to manage the diverted medication operation. There's a direct digital connection between his Foundation activities and his illegal enterprises. The pieces were falling into place, a coordinated strategy to isolate Julian from his powerful backers while simultaneously building an irrefutable case against him. "We need to move quickly," Ezra decided. "Julian knows Hayden, and Marcus observed his operation. He'll accelerate his timeline, try to strike before we can respond." "What's our play?" Vivian asked. Always the pragmatist. "Two-pronged approach," Ezra replied. "Ellis provides the Mercers with proof of Julian's unauthorized activities. Simultaneously, we document the diverted medication operation and prepare evidence for selected law enforcement contacts." "Julian has influence with local police," Raymond cautioned. "Which is why we're not using local channels," Ezra countered. "Judge Carmichael has a contact at the federal level, someone beyond Julian's reach, who specializes in pharmaceutical crimes." The strategy took shape over the next hour, precise, methodical, covering every contingency. Hayden contributed her analytical perspective, identifying potential weaknesses in Julian's operation that could be exploited, suggesting documentation approaches that would satisfy regulatory authorities. As the meeting concluded and the others filed out to execute their assignments, Ezra asked Hayden to stay behind. "You took an enormous risk today," he said once they were alone. "I made a calculated decision," she corrected. "One that paid off. You could have been killed, or worse, used as leverage against me." His voice held an intensity that caught her off guard. Julian wouldn't have hesitated to use you to get to me. The implication hung between them that she had become a potential vulnerability for Ezra, someone whose safety mattered to him beyond professional concerns. "I'm not a liability, Ezra," she said quietly. "I'm an asset. Today proved that." "You're both," he replied, moving closer. "And that complicates things." The air between them seemed to charge with unspoken tension. For months, they had maintained careful professional boundaries, despite the growing connection neither had fully acknowledged. "When does Scout return?" Ezra asked, changing the subject. "Once Julian is no longer a threat," Hayden replied. "Not before." "And after that?" His question carried weight beyond its simple words. "What happens when this is over, Hayden?" It was the first time either had directly addressed the future, what might exist between them when the crisis passed, when professional necessity no longer dictated their constant proximity. Before she could answer, Ezra's phone buzzed with an urgent message from Marcus. His expression darkened as he read it. "Julian's making his move," he said grimly. "He's called an emergency meeting with the Mercer family board for tomorrow morning, plans to present evidence of criminal activities within the Bishop pharmaceutical program. That's sooner than we expected," Hayden observed, quickly refocusing on the immediate threat. "He's accelerating because of what you discovered today." Ezra was already texting instructions to his team. "We need to preempt him. Ellis needs to get the digital evidence to Charles Mercer tonight, not tomorrow." The moment of personal vulnerability had passed, replaced by strategic necessity. Yet something had shifted between them, a boundary crossed, a possibility acknowledged. "What can I do?" Hayden asked, already moving toward the door. "Work with Ellis. Your medical background adds credibility to the evidence. Help her prepare a presentation the Mercers can't ignore." Ezra paused, then added, "And Hayden, no more solo investigations. We move together from now on." The next 12 hours passed in a blur of focused activity. Hayden worked alongside Ellis, translating complex pharmaceutical evidence into compelling narratives that even non-medical executives could understand. They documented how Julian had created a shadow operation using diverted medications, established the timeline of his embezzlement, and compiled irrefutable proof of his unauthorized use of Mercer Foundation resources. By dawn, they had assembled a comprehensive case against Julian Hayes' digital, financial, and pharmaceutical evidence that formed an interlocking picture of calculated criminal activity spanning years. "It's good," Ellis assessed, reviewing their final presentation. "Better than good. It's airtight." "Will it be enough?" Hayden asked, exhaustion making her voice rough. Julian's had years to cultivate relationships with the Mercers. Charles Mercer didn't build a financial empire by backing losing propositions, Ellis replied. "When he sees this evidence, he'll cut Julian loose. It's simply good business." Ezra appeared in the doorway, looking as tired as Hayden felt but with the focused energy that seemed to sustain him through crises. "Raymond just heard from Judge Carmichael," he reported. "Charles Mercer received our preliminary evidence packet last night. He's postponed the board meeting Julian requested." "That's promising," Ellis observed. "There's more," Ezra continued. "The Mercer Foundation has placed the employee who visited the cabin on administrative leave pending investigation." Relief washed through Hayden. "They're distancing themselves from Julian's actions." "Precisely." Ezra's expression remained cautious. "But Julian won't go quietly. He'll have contingency plans, counter-moves." As if summoned by his words, Hayden's phone rang an unknown number. She answered cautiously, "Miss Knox." Julian's voice was smooth, controlled. "I believe we have matters to discuss." Hayden activated the speakerphone, meeting Ezra's eyes. "I have nothing to say to you, Mr. Hayes. Not even regarding your son's future custody arrangements." The threat was thinly veiled, delivered with practiced casualness. Child services can be so thorough when investigating single mothers with questionable employment. Anger flashed through Hayden, hot and immediate. "Touch my son, and there won't be a place on earth you can hide." Julian chuckled. Such dramatic threats from a lab technician. "But I'm not calling to exchange pleasantries. I'm offering a deal." "We don't make deals with thieves," Ezra interjected, his voice cold. "Ah, Ezra, I suspected you might be listening." Julian sounded unsurprised. "My offer is simple, Miss Knox provides a sworn statement regarding the Bishop pharmaceutical program, its real purpose, its criminal distribution channels, its exploitation of vulnerable patients. In exchange, her maternal fitness remains unquestioned. That program helps people who would otherwise suffer," Hayden replied, disgust evident in her voice. "Unlike your counterfeiting operation, which puts patients at risk for profit. A brief silence followed before Julian spoke again, his tone hardening. You've made your choice then. Pity. Scout seems like such a bright child. The call ended abruptly, leaving a tense silence in its wake. He's desperate, Ellis assessed. Making direct threats means he knows his position with the Mercers is weakening. Or, he's confident enough to show his hand, Raymond countered, having entered during the call. Julian doesn't make empty threats. Ezra's expression had darkened dangerously. We end this. Now. The plan crystallized with ruthless efficiency over the next hour. Ellis would deliver their complete evidence package to Charles Mercer personally, accompanied by Raymond, whose old-world gravitas carried weight with the Mercer patriarch. Simultaneously, Vivian would meet with Judge Carmichael's federal contact, providing documentation of the pharmaceutical counterfeiting operation. And Julian himself? Hayden asked the question everyone was thinking. Marcus is tracking his movements, Ezra replied. When the Mercers officially cut ties, which they will after seeing our evidence, Julian will make one final desperate move. And we'll be waiting, Raymond concluded grimly. As the others departed to execute their assignments, Hayden found herself alone with Ezra again. The threat to Scout hung between them, adding personal stakes to what had already been a high-risk confrontation. I want to bring Scout home, she said quietly. Once this is over. I'm tired of being separated from him. Of course, Ezra agreed. When Julian is no longer a threat, Scout returns. He hesitated, then added, To where, Hayden? Your old apartment? The condo? The question carried implications beyond logistics. It was about her future, Scout's future, and potentially their future together. I don't know, she admitted. 3 months ago, I was desperate enough to beg my brother for formula money. Now I'm helping dismantle a criminal enterprise. It's a lot to process. Ezra moved closer, his normally guarded expression softening. Whatever you decide, you'll have options. Financial security, professional opportunities. You've more than earned that. Is that what this is about? She asked, meeting his gaze directly. What I've earned? The question hung between them, a challenge to articulate what had been building since that first mistaken text message. Before Ezra could respond, Marcus appeared in the doorway, his expression urgent. Julian's on the move, headed to the Mercer estate ahead of schedule. He's trying to get ahead of our evidence, Ezra realized, immediately shifting back to tactical focus. How long until Raymond and Ellis arrive there? 20 minutes minimum. Not enough time, Ezra concluded. Julian will have access to Charles Mercer first, shape the narrative. Unless we intercept him, Hayden suggested. Ezra considered this, then nodded. Marcus, bring the car around. We're going to pay the Mercers a visit. The Mercer estate occupied prime lakefront property north of the city, old money displayed through understated elegance rather than ostentatious wealth. As their car approached the gated entrance, they could see Julian's vehicle already parked in the circular drive. We're too late, Marcus observed. He's already inside. Not necessarily, Ezra replied, reaching for his phone. Judge Carmichael gave me a direct contact for these circumstances. He spoke briefly, his tone respectful but authoritative. Within moments, the estate gates swung open, and a security guard waved them through. Advantages of old alliances, Ezra explained as they proceeded up the drive. Charles Mercer's father and mine understood the value of communication, even between occasional adversaries. The mansion's imposing oak doors opened as they approached, revealing a silver-haired butler who regarded them with practiced neutrality. Mr. Mercer is in his study with Mr. Hayes, he informed them. He asked that you be shown in immediately. The study was a testament to old wealth, leather-bound books, oil paintings, antique furnishings that had likely been in the family for generations. Charles Mercer sat behind an imposing desk, while Julian stood nearby, his presentation interrupted by their arrival. The older man's expression was unreadable, but Julian's barely concealed fury was evident. Ezra, Mercer greeted, rising slightly. This is unexpected. Not entirely, I think, Ezra replied calmly. Judge Carmichael mentioned we might need to speak directly. He did indeed. Mercer's gaze shifted to Hayden. And you must be Miss Knox, the pharmaceutical specialist I've heard so much about recently. This is outrageous, Julian interjected, struggling to maintain his composure. I was in the middle of presenting critical information that conveniently omits your own role in the matters being discussed. Ezra interrupted smoothly. He gestured to the leather portfolio Hayden carried. We have more complete documentation, if you're interested, Mr. Mercer. Charles Mercer studied them both, then made a decision. I believe I would be remiss not to examine all available evidence. He gestured to chairs opposite his desk. Please, join us. For the next 20 minutes, Hayden presented their findings with clinical precision: the diverted medications, the counterfeiting operation, Julian's unauthorized use of Mercer Foundation resources, all supported by irrefutable documentation, and Ellis's digital forensics. Julian attempted several interruptions, each more desperate than the last, but Mercer silenced him with increasingly impatient gestures. When Hayden concluded, the room fell silent. Charles Mercer removed his reading glasses, fixing Julian with a cold stare that belied his cultured appearance. "Did you genuinely believe," he asked quietly, "that I would not discover your unauthorized use of Foundation resources to target a child? That I would condone such methods, regardless of the business objectives?" Julian paled slightly. "Charles, I can explain." "I think you've explained quite enough," Mercer cut him off. He turned to Ezra. "It appears we have been misinformed regarding certain aspects of the Bishop family operations. The pharmaceutical program, in particular, seems considerably more ethical than Mr. Hayes suggested." "We believe in balancing business interests with community needs," Ezra replied diplomatically. "Something your family has also demonstrated throughout its history." Mercer nodded, a tacit acknowledgement of their shared understanding. "Then perhaps it's time to reconsider the recent tensions between our organizations." He glanced at Julian, particularly given the apparent source of those tensions. Julian's composed facade finally cracked. "You can't possibly believe them over me," he protested. "I've served your family interests for years, while apparently serving your own interests first." Mercer interrupted sharply. "That's not how we conduct business, Julian. It never has been." The door opened, admitting Raymond and Ellis, who had finally arrived with the complete evidence package. Their entrance seemed to mark the final collapse of Julian's position. "I believe," Charles Mercer said, rising from his desk, "that this meeting has concluded. Mr. Hayes, the Foundation will be conducting a full investigation into your activities. In the meantime, consider your association with Mercer interests suspended." Julian stood frozen, watching as his carefully constructed power play disintegrated before him. His gaze fixed on Hayden, naked hatred replacing his usual calculated control. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "Especially for you, Miss Knox. Some debts transcend business arrangements." "That sounded remarkably like a threat," Charles Mercer observed coldly. "Another poor decision on your part." He nodded to the silent security personnel who had entered behind Raymond. "Please escort Mr. Hayes from the property. Ensure he understands he is no longer welcome here." As Julian was led away, his final glare at Hayden carried a promise of retribution that sent a chill through her despite their victory. "He won't stop," she said quietly to Ezra as they prepared to leave. "Not until he's physically unable to continue." "I know," Ezra replied, his voice equally low. "That's the next phase." Outside, as they walked toward their car, Hayden finally asked the question that had been building. "What happens to Julian now?" Ezra glanced at her, measuring how much to share. "That depends partly on you," he said finally. "On me?" "The compound you designed," he explained. "It remains an option. Clean, untraceable, final. The implication hung between them, Julian's permanent removal, the solution she had helped create during that long night at the warehouse apartment. Hayden considered this, weighing moral boundaries against practical necessities. Julian had threatened Scout directly, had attempted to destroy her credibility, separate her from her child, would continue to pose a threat as long as he remained free to act. "There's another way," she said finally. "Less permanent but perhaps more fitting." "I'm listening." "The federal investigation of the counterfeiting operation," Hayden explained. "If they find evidence of Julian's direct involvement, which they will, thanks to Ellis's work, he faces pharmaceutical fraud charges at the federal level. No local influence to save him, no Mercer connections to leverage." Ezra considered this. "Justice through legitimate channels. Poetic, isn't it?" Hayden smiled slightly. "Using the very legal system he tried to manipulate against us." As they drove back to the Palisade, plans already in motion to provide the federal investigators with carefully curated evidence, Hayden felt the weight of the past days lifting slightly. Julian would face consequences through official channels. Scout could return home safely. The Bishop pharmaceutical program would continue helping patients who needed access to medications. And whatever existed between her and Ezra, the unacknowledged connection that had grown through crisis and collaboration, would finally have space to be examined in the light of normal life, whatever normal might mean in their unconventional world. Later that evening, As federal agents executed search warrants at Julian's counterfeiting facility based on evidence Vivian had provided, Hayden stood at the window of Ezra's office, watching the city lights emerge against the darkening sky. "It worked," Ezra said, entering with the news. Julian was arrested at his home 30 minutes ago. Federal charges, no bail given his flight risk, and the severity of the pharmaceutical crimes. Relief washed through Hayden. "It's really over?" "This chapter, yes." Ezra moved to stand beside her at the window. Judge Carmichael called as well. "The Mercers have formally withdrawn any challenge to Bishop family interests. Charles apparently found our pharmaceutical program intriguing from a humanitarian perspective. So everything returns to normal," Hayden murmured. "A new normal, perhaps," Ezra replied, turning to face her directly. "The question is what that looks like for you. For Scout." The moment had arrived, the conversation they'd deferred through crisis and conflict. "I don't want to leave," Hayden said simply. "The work we're doing with the pharmaceutical program, making it more legitimate, creating proper channels, it matters. To patients who need help. To me, professionally. And personally?" Ezra asked quietly. Hayden met his gaze. 3 months ago, I accidentally texted a stranger begging for formula money. That stranger turned out to be you. Since then, you've changed my life in ways I couldn't have imagined. Given Scout opportunities he would never have had. Valued my skills when no one else would." She paused. "But it's more than gratitude, Ezra. You know that." "I do," he agreed, something softening in his expression. "Just as I know my interest in you went beyond professional value from the beginning." "So what happens next?" Hayden asked, echoing the question he'd posed days earlier. Ezra took her hand, the gesture both gentle and significant. "That depends on what you want. But I'd like Scout and you to be part of my life, not as employees or allies, but as family." The word hung between them, family, with all its implications and possibilities. "I'd like that too," Hayden admitted softly. "But my eyes are open, Ezra. I know what the Bishop family is, what it does. I've made peace with the gray areas we operate in. But Scout deserves a future with options, with legitimate choices. Which is exactly why I've been transitioning family operations," Ezra replied. "The pharmaceutical program is just the beginning. Within 5 years, Bishop Enterprises will be predominantly legitimate. The old methods, the criminal operations, they're being phased out. Not overnight, but steadily. A new legacy," Hayden murmured. "For the next generation. For Scout," Ezra agreed. "If you'll allow me to be part of his life, part of yours." Their hands remained linked as they looked out over the city, a vista of lights and shadows that mirrored the complex world they navigated together. A world where a mistaken text message had led to an unlikely connection between a desperate single mother and a gangster with unexpected depths. A world where sometimes the most meaningful relationships began with the simplest accidents. "I should call Delia," Hayden said finally, a smile touching her lips. "Tell her it's safe to bring Scout home." "Home," Ezra repeated, the word carrying weight beyond its single syllable. "I like the sound of that." As night settled fully over Crescent Falls, they remained by the window, hands still linked, the future stretching before them with possibilities neither could have imagined just 3 months earlier. Scout's return home marked a turning point. After 3 weeks of separation, Hayden held him tightly, breathing in his familiar baby scent, while he babbled excitedly about his vacation with Auntie Dee. At 20 months old, his vocabulary expanded daily, though his understanding of the crisis that had necessitated his absence remained mercifully limited. Delia had brought him directly to the new address Hayden provided, not her previous condo, but a spacious townhouse in a secure community near the Palisade. The move had happened while Scout was away, arranged by Vivian with typical efficiency. The townhouse technically belonged to a Bishop family subsidiary, but Hayden had already begun the process of purchasing it outright, insisting on establishing her financial independence despite Ezra's assurances it wasn't necessary. "This place is significant," Delia observed carefully as she helped unpack Scout's belongings. Her expression held the unasked questions that had accumulated during their separation. "A lot has changed," Hayden acknowledged, watching Scout explore his new bedroom with its custom furniture and educational toys. "Not just where we live. The men who stayed with us at the cabin," Delia said quietly. "They weren't ordinary security, were they? The way they moved, the protocols they followed, that was military-grade protection." Hayden met her friend's gaze directly. "You deserve the truth. Ezra Bishop isn't just a businessman. The Bishop family has interests that extend beyond traditional commerce." "You mean they're criminals," Delia stated flatly. "That's an oversimplification," Hayden replied. finding herself defending a perspective she couldn't have imagined embracing months earlier. Yes, some bishop operations exist in legal gray areas, but they're evolving, legitimizing. The pharmaceutical program helps patients who would otherwise suffer. Delia studied her, concern evident in her expression. And where do you fit into all this? What exactly is your role in the bishop organization now? It was the question Hayden had been asking herself since Julian's arrest. Who was she now in this complex ecosystem? Quality control specialist? Strategic partner? Something more personal that defied professional categorization? I oversee the pharmaceutical program, she explained, ensuring safety, quality, proper distribution. We're working to establish more legitimate channels, partnerships with compassionate use foundations, proper regulatory frameworks. And Ezra Bishop? Delia pressed. Your relationship with him seems evolved. Hayden smiled slightly at the careful word choice. It is. We're together. Personally as well as professionally. You're dating a gangster, Delia translated bluntly. I'm building a life with a man who's changing his family legacy, Hayden corrected. Who gave Scout and me opportunities when we had none? Who values me for exactly who I am, including the parts of myself I'd never fully acknowledged? Delia absorbed this, her expression softening slightly. He makes you happy? Yes, Hayden replied simply, in ways I didn't expect. After a moment, Delia nodded. Then I'm happy for you. Cautiously, with reservations. But happy. The acceptance, qualified though it was, meant more than Hayden had anticipated. As they continued unpacking, conversation shifting to lighter topics, she felt the first threads of her separated worlds, beginning to interlace her past as a struggling single mother, her present as a Bishop family insider. Later that evening, after Delia departed, and Scout finally succumbed to sleep, Ezra arrived. He moved through the townhouse with careful consideration, as if conscious of entering a space that was fundamentally hers despite his involvement in securing it. How's he doing? He asked, pausing at the doorway to Scout's room, watching the sleeping child with an expression Hayden found unexpectedly tender. Excited, confused, adaptable, she replied, leading him back to the living room. Children are resilient, especially when they feel safe. They settled on the couch, the domestic normalcy of the moment striking after weeks of crisis management and strategic maneuvering. Julian's arraignment is tomorrow, Ezra said after a comfortable silence. Federal prosecutors are confident. The evidence is overwhelming. And the Mercers? Maintaining distance. Charles has made it clear that Julian acted without authorization. Their influence won't help him this time. Hayden nodded, relief mixing with lingering vigilance. And our pharmaceutical program? Will it survive scrutiny now that Julian's activities are public? Better than survive, Ezra replied, something like pride touching his expression. Judge Carmichael's federal contact has expressed interest in using our model as a template for compassionate access reform. With proper structure and oversight, what we've built could become a legitimate pathway for patients who fall through regulatory cracks. The implication was significant. The potential transformation of a gray market operation into something officially sanctioned, even praised. It represented exactly the kind of evolution Ezra had spoken of. Legacy businesses transitioning toward legitimacy without abandoning their core purpose. That's remarkable, Hayden said, genuinely impressed. From potential criminal investigation to policy model, much of the credit belongs to you, Ezra noted. Your protocols, documentation standards, quality controls, they provided the framework that made this possible. The acknowledgement warmed her. For most of her professional life, Hayden had worked in systems that undervalued her contributions, that treated her as replaceable despite her specialized knowledge. With Ezra, her expertise was not just recognized but central to their shared success. I've been thinking about next steps, she said, turning toward him more fully. For the program, for my role within it, I'm listening. We need a formal research component, Hayden explained, enthusiasm building as she outlined ideas that had been forming during the crisis. Clinical outcomes tracking, efficacy documentation, comparison studies between imported medications and their domestic equivalents. Build a body of evidence that supports expanded access. Ezra listened intently, his expression thoughtful. You're talking about creating a legitimate research institute under the Bishop umbrella. Exactly. Not just distributing medications, but generating the data needed to change policies, expand options for patients. She hesitated. It would require investment, resources, specialized personnel. Done, Ezra said without hesitation. Whatever you need. The immediate commitment caught her off guard. Just like that? Just like that, he confirmed, his expression softening. Hayden, when you accidentally texted me that night, I was in a place of stagnation. The Bishop family businesses were profitable but purposeless. I was maintaining what my father built without vision for what came next. He reached for her hand, a gesture that had become natural between them. You changed that, not just with your professional skills, though those have proven invaluable, but by showing me possibilities I hadn't considered, legitimate operations with genuine social impact, evolution rather than mere preservation. The admission, vulnerable, sincere, touched Hayden deeply. She'd come to understand Ezra as a man of careful words, measured emotions. This level of openness represented a trust that matched her own. I never expected any of this, she confessed. When I texted that wrong number, I was just trying to feed Scout, to survive another day. I couldn't see beyond the immediate crisis. And now? Now I'm planning research institutes and policy reform, she replied with a small laugh. While my son sleeps in a bedroom nicer than any place I've ever lived, while discussing federal prosecution strategy with the man who sent me $5,000 for formula, the absurdity of it struck them both, prompting genuine laughter that felt cleansing after weeks of tension. When it subsided, Ezra's expression grew more serious. There's something else we should discuss, he said. About Scout. Hayden tensed slightly, maternal protectiveness automatically engaging. Nothing concerning, Ezra assured her, reading her reaction. The opposite, actually. I've established a trust for his education and future needs. Irrevocable, independently managed, completely separate from Bishop family finances. The gesture, both generous and thoughtful in its structure, left Hayden momentarily speechless. Before you object, Ezra continued, it's not charity or obligation. It's investment in potential, in the next generation, in someone who matters to you, and therefore to me. Hayden felt tears threatening unexpected emotion rising at this tangible demonstration of care not just for her but for Scout. For months, she had shouldered the responsibility of his future alone, constantly fearing she would fail him through circumstances beyond her control. Thank you, she said simply, words inadequate for the complex emotions his gesture evoked. There's one more thing, Ezra added, a hint of uncertainty unusual in his typically confident demeanor. The trust documentation required naming a guardian, someone to oversee Scout's interests until he's of age. And you listed me, obviously, Hayden said. I listed both of us, Ezra corrected gently. If that's acceptable to you, it doesn't imply legal guardianship or parental rights, just financial oversight, shared responsibility for his future. The implication resonated beyond the practical details. Ezra was, in his careful way, expressing commitment not just to Hayden but to Scout as well. To being a presence, a supportive figure, in the child's life long term. That's more than acceptable, Hayden assured him, emotion making her voice slightly rough. It's right. The moment between them deepened, evolving into something that transcended their professional alliance or even their romantic connection. A shared vision for the future, for legacy, for family defined not by blood but by choice. Stay tonight, Hayden said impulsively. Scout would love to see you in the morning. The invitation represented another boundary crossed the first time Ezra would stay in her home, the first integration of their personal relationship into the daily routines of her life with Scout. I'd like that, he replied simply. Later, after they had retired to her bedroom, another threshold crossed. Hayden found herself watching Ezra as he slept. In repose, the careful control he maintained during waking hours softened, revealing glimpses of the man beneath the calculated exterior. She thought about the extraordinary path that had brought them here, a desperate text message sent to a wrong number, a gangster's unexpected generosity, a single mother's determination to protect her child. None of it could have been predicted, planned, or engineered. Yet somehow, it had created a connection that felt more genuine than any relationship she'd experienced before, one built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and an understanding that transcended conventional boundaries of right and wrong, legal and illegal, appropriate and inappropriate. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: Julian's arraignment, the continuing evolution of the pharmaceutical program, the complex integration of Hayden's role as both romantic partner and strategic advisor in the Bishop organization. But tonight, in the quiet of her new home, with Scout sleeping peacefully down the hall and Ezra beside her, Hayden felt something she had almost forgotten existed: security. Not just financial or physical, but emotional. The certainty that whatever came next, she would face it from a position of strength rather than desperation. And that made all the difference. 6 months after Julian Hayes's arraignment, life had settled into a rhythm that still occasionally struck Hayden as surreal. The federal case against Julian proceeded with methodical efficiency, his attempts to leverage remaining connections thwarted by the overwhelming evidence Ellis had compiled. With the Mercers publicly distancing themselves and Judge Carmichael's influence ensuring proper judicial attention, Julian faced the prospect of significant prison time. The Bishop pharmaceutical program had undergone dramatic transformation, evolving from gray market operation to pioneering compassionate access initiative. Under Hayden's direction, they had established the formal research component she envisioned, the Bishop Institute for Medical Access, complete with dedicated laboratories, documentation protocols, and partnerships with physicians committed to patient advocacy. Scout, now approaching his 2nd birthday, thrived in his new environment. The toddler who had once subsisted on watered-down formula now chattered constantly, his vocabulary expanding daily, his natural intelligence nurtured by educational resources Hayden could never have provided alone. And her relationship with Ezra had deepened, their personal connection strengthening alongside their professional collaboration. He spent most nights at the townhouse now, his presence becoming a familiar comfort to both Hayden and Scout. The child had taken to him with surprising ease, greeting his arrivals with enthusiastic babbling and demanding Ez read his bedtime stories. On this particular evening, Hayden sat on the townhouse patio, watching Ezra and Scout in the small garden. The sight still occasionally caught her off guard. Crescent Falls' most powerful underworld figure patiently showing a toddler how to water plants, his customary controlled demeanor softened by genuine engagement. "More?" Scout asked, holding up his miniature watering can. "A little more," Ezra agreed, demonstrating the proper amount. "Just enough to help them grow, not so much they drown." Hayden smiled at the unconscious metaphor. It reflected Ezra's approach to many things: measured support, controlled assistance, careful balance between too much and too little. Her phone buzzed with a message from Vivian. "Meeting confirmed with FDA representatives. Tuesday, 10 a.m. They've reviewed our preliminary documentation. Initial response positive. Another step forward in legitimizing the pharmaceutical program." The FDA's interest represented more than regulatory compliance. It signaled potential systemic change, the possibility that the model they'd developed might influence broader policy. "Good news?" Ezra asked, noticing her expression as he and Scout returned to the patio. "FDA meeting confirmed," she replied. "Vivian says they're receptive to our approach." "Of course they are," Ezra said, setting Scout down with his toys before joining Hayden. "Your documentation is impeccable. The outcomes data speaks for itself." "It's more than that," Hayden observed. "The timing is right. Healthcare costs rising, patient advocacy groups gaining influence, political pressure for reform. Our model offers a middle path, controlled access outside traditional channels but with rigorous safety protocols." "See? Strategic thinking." Ezra's expression held quiet pride. "This is why you've become indispensable to the organization. You see patterns, opportunities, connections others miss." The compliment warmed her, particularly because it acknowledged her intellectual contributions rather than just her technical skills. Throughout her career, Hayden had often found her analytical abilities undervalued, her insights dismissed in favor of more credentialed opinions. "The Bishop Institute could become something significant," she said, allowing herself to voice the ambitious vision that had been forming. "Not just a research component for our program, but a legitimate think tank for healthcare access reform. If that's what you want to build, I'll support it," Ezra replied without hesitation. "Resources, connections, infrastructure, whatever you need." His immediate commitment, offered without qualification, still occasionally surprised her. Hayden had spent so many years fighting for basic resources, making cases for minimal funding, that Ezra's approach, decisive backing for initiatives he believed in, remained refreshingly direct. "Speaking of building things," he continued, reaching into his pocket, "I have something for you. For both of you, actually." He handed her a small envelope. Inside was a key card with a simple address embossed on its surface. "What's this?" she asked. "A property I acquired recently. Lakefront, private grounds, excellent security features, significantly more space than this townhouse." Ezra paused, watching her reaction carefully. "I thought perhaps if you were interested it could become our home. Together." Officially, the proposal for that's what it was, despite the indirect phrasing hung between them. Hayden turned the keycard over in her hands, processing its implications. "You're asking us to move in with you," she clarified. "To create a home together." "Yes," Ezra confirmed simply. "If you're ready for that step, Hayden glanced at Scout, happily arranging blocks on the patio floor, oblivious to the significant conversation happening above his head. "This is a big decision," she said carefully. "Not just for me, but for Scout. He's attached to you already, but living together full-time that creates expectations, bonds." "I understand that," Ezra replied, his tone serious. "I wouldn't suggest it if I weren't fully committed to both of you, to being a consistent presence in his life, in yours." Hayden studied him, seeing beyond the controlled exterior to the vulnerability beneath the man who had texted back to a stranger in need, who had created opportunities when he could have simply moved on, who had gradually opened himself to the possibility of family beyond blood ties and business alliances. "I'd like to see it first," she said finally. "The property. Make sure it feels right for Scout." "Of course." Relief touched Ezra's expression. "Tomorrow? We could bring Scout, let him explore." "Tomorrow," Hayden agreed, a smile forming. "A family outing to see our potential new home." The words hung between them, family and home, weighted with significance for two people who had approached their relationship with such careful pragmatism. Something shifted in Ezra's expression, softened and intensified simultaneously. "There's something else," he said, reaching into his pocket again. "Something I've been considering for some time." The small velvet box he produced sent Hayden's heart racing. She had expected many things from their relationship, but this traditional gesture seemed almost incongruous with the unconventional path they'd traveled. "Ezra," she began, her voice catching slightly. "Just listen," he said quietly. "Please." He opened the box, revealing not a conventional engagement ring but a uniquely designed piece, a deep green emerald surrounded by smaller diamonds, set in platinum with intricate detailing that, upon closer inspection, incorporated subtle chemical structures. "The molecular pattern," Ezra explained, noting her recognition, "is serotonin, the neurotransmitter associated with happiness, connection, well-being. The design is unique, created specifically for you, a toxicologist, who understands both chemical structures and human complexities. The thoughtfulness behind the design, personalized, scientifically meaningful, aesthetically beautiful, touched Hayden deeply." 6 months ago," Ezra continued, "you accidentally texted me asking for formula money. That random connection changed everything for you, for Scout, for me, for the entire Bishop organization, which is evolving in ways I hadn't imagined possible." He took her hand, his typically composed expression giving way to genuine emotion. "I'm not asking you to be my wife in the traditional sense. Our relationship has never followed conventional patterns. I'm asking you to be my partner in business, in family, in creating a legacy that transcends what the Bishop name has meant before." The proposal matched their relationship perfectly, acknowledging its unconventional nature while affirming its profound significance. It wasn't about social expectations or traditional roles, but about conscious choice, deliberate commitment, shared vision. "Yes," Hayden said simply, her analytical mind for once quieted by the certainty in her heart. "Partner in all senses, all aspects." As Ezra slipped the ring onto her finger, Scout toddled over, curious about the shiny object that had captured their attention. He reached for Hayden's hand, examining the ring with solemn concentration. "Pretty," he declared with toddler certainty. "Very pretty," Hayden agreed, smiling at her son. "Do you like it?" Scout nodded enthusiastically, then turned to Ezra with the direct gaze of a child who hadn't yet learned social pretense. "You stay now? Always?" The question, innocent yet profound, hung in the air between them. Ezra crouched to Scout's level, meeting his eyes with matching seriousness. "Yes," he promised. "I'll stay, always." The simple exchange sealed what the ring had symbolized, commitment not just between adults but to the child whose needs had catalyzed their connection. A family forming not through traditional paths but through choice, circumstance, and the strange alchemy of necessary alliance evolving into genuine love. The lakefront property exceeded Hayden's expectations. Set on several wooded acres with its own private beach, the house balanced modern security features with warm architectural elements, large windows capturing natural light, open spaces designed for gathering, and private areas for work and reflection. The previous owner was a tech entrepreneur, Ezra explained as they toured the grounds, Scout running ahead to explore with the boundless energy of early childhood. He designed it with both security and comfort in mind. The entire property has advanced monitoring systems, but they're unobtrusive. "It's beautiful," Hayden acknowledged, pausing at the edge of the wooden deck that overlooked the lake. "But it's also significant, making a statement." "Is that a problem?" Ezra asked, genuinely curious rather than defensive. Not a problem, Hayden clarified. Just an adjustment. 3 months ago, I was stretching formula with water in an apartment with unreliable electricity. This is, she gestured to the expansive property, a different universe. Ezra considered this, understanding the underlying concern. You're worried about losing perspective, about Scout growing up with privilege that disconnects him from reality. Yes, she admitted. I want him to have opportunities I didn't have, but I don't want him to take them for granted. To understand the value of work, of struggle, of earning your place. Those lessons come from parents, not properties, Ezra observed, from values demonstrated daily, not material surroundings. He paused, watching Scout examine a pine cone with intense fascination. My father raised me in wealth, but ensured I understood its source, its cost, its responsibilities. Whatever values we want Scout to develop, we'll teach him through our actions. The insight reassured her. It wasn't about the house itself, but about the family they created within it, the principles they lived by, the examples they set. Then yes, Hayden decided. It feels right for us, for our future. The move happened gradually over the next month, integrated with their professional responsibilities and Scout's routine. Hayden insisted on maintaining certain elements from their previous lives. Scout's familiar bedding, toys he was particularly attached to, photographs that tracked their journey from struggling single mother and child to their current reality. As they settled into the lakeside home, other aspects of their shared life evolved as well. The Bishop Institute secured formal status as a research organization, with Hayden as its executive director. The pharmaceutical program received preliminary approval for a pilot partnership with the FDA, establishing a framework for compassionate use that could potentially be replicated nationally. And the Bishop family businesses continued their gradual transformation, legitimate operations expanding, gray market activities restructured toward conventional channels, criminal elements scaled back or eliminated entirely. The process wasn't without resistance from old guard associates like Raymond, who occasionally questioned the wisdom of abandoning proven profit centers for more regulated endeavors. The old ways built this organization, he reminded Ezra during a strategy meeting at the Palisade. Protection operations, strategic pressure, controlled distribution. These generated the capital that funds your new initiatives. They also created vulnerabilities Julian exploited, Ezra countered. Criminal operations require criminal methods, which attract criminal attention. Evolution isn't just ethical, it's practical risk management. The debate highlighted the delicate balance Ezra navigated, honoring the organization's history while redirecting its trajectory, maintaining strength while reducing exposure, preserving loyalty while implementing necessary change. Throughout this transition, Hayden found her role expanding beyond the pharmaceutical program. Her analytical perspective, scientific background, and strategic thinking made her a valuable advisor across multiple Bishop enterprises. She approached each business challenge as she would a laboratory problem, methodical analysis, identification of variables, development of testable solutions. On a crisp autumn evening, almost exactly 1 year after Hayden's accidental text, they hosted a small gathering at the lake house. Delia and her new boyfriend, Vivian and her husband, Marcus and his partner, along with Judge Carmichael and his wife. It wasn't a formal engagement celebration, though Hayden's ring caught the light occasionally, prompting knowing smiles from those who recognized its significance. Rather, it was something more meaningful, the integration of their separate worlds, the acknowledgement of the unconventional family they had created, the celebration of transformations, both personal and professional. As Scout charmed the guests with his expanding vocabulary and infectious enthusiasm, Hayden found herself on the deck with Judge Carmichael, both watching the sunset over the lake. Remarkable changes this past year, the judge observed, his tone appreciative. The Bishop Pharmaceutical Initiative is generating attention in policy circles. Positive attention. It's gratifying to see the model recognized, Hayden acknowledged. Patients who need help are getting it through proper channels now. And the other Bishop enterprises? The judge inquired carefully. I understand those are evolving as well. Steadily, Hayden confirmed. Not overnight transformation, but purposeful redirection, building legitimate operations that maintain influence without criminal exposure. Judge Carmichael nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. This is what I hope to see from the Bishop organization: adaptation, evolution, preservation of strength while reducing methods that attract federal attention. He glanced at her ring. And I suspect your influence has accelerated this process considerably. Before Hayden could respond, Scout came running onto the deck, excitement radiating from his small frame. Mama, Ez says show lake fish. Judge Carmichael smiled at the child's enthusiasm. Young Mr. Scout appears ready for his evening nature lesson, he observed with gentle humor. Don't let me keep you. As Hayden followed Scout to the lakefront where Ezra waited with a child-sized fishing rod, she reflected on the judge's observation about her influence on the Bishop organization's evolution. It wasn't entirely accurate. Ezra had initiated the transition before her arrival, recognizing the necessity of adaptation for long-term survival. What she had provided wasn't the impetus for change but a framework for implementation, scientific methodology applied to organizational transformation, data-driven approaches to risk management, strategic restructuring based on outcome analysis rather than tradition. Together, they were creating something neither could have built alone. A family business evolving from its criminal roots toward legitimate power, influence directed toward systemic reform rather than exploitation, strength maintained without unnecessary violence. As they stood at the water's edge, Ezra patiently showing Scout how to hold the fishing rod, Hayden felt a sense of completion she had never expected to find. The desperate mother who had texted a wrong number in search of formula money had found not just financial security but purpose, partnership, and the chance to build something meaningful that extended beyond her own life. Try it, Ezra encouraged Scout, helping him cast the line into the shallow water. Just like we practiced. Scout's face contorted with concentration as he attempted the motion, his small hands gripping the rod with determination that reminded Hayden so much of herself, the stubborn persistence that had carried her through nursing school while pregnant, through layoffs and poverty, through the challenges of single motherhood. I did it! Scout exclaimed as the line arced over the water, landing with a small splash. You did, Ezra confirmed, his usually reserved expression warm with genuine pride. Excellent technique. Watching them together, the gangster and the child, connected by choice rather than biology, Hayden thought about the strange, unpredictable paths that led people to their most meaningful connections. How a desperate text message sent to a wrong number had created not just an opportunity, but a family. How crisis had revealed character. How professional alliance had evolved into personal commitment. How shared purpose had transformed into shared life. Later that night, after their guests had departed, and Scout was asleep, Hayden and Ezra stood on the deck again, the lake silvered by moonlight. The evening had marked something significant, not just the anniversary of their unusual beginning, but the integration of their worlds. The acknowledgement of their shared future. Thank you, Hayden said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. For what? Ezra asked, his arm around her shoulders in a gesture that had become natural between them. For responding to that text, she replied simply. You could have ignored it. Most people would have. Ezra considered this, his expression thoughtful in the moonlight. I've thought about that moment often, why I responded when I typically ignored messages from unknown numbers. I still don't have a complete answer. Maybe some connections don't need explanation, Hayden suggested. They just need recognition. Perhaps, he agreed. Whatever the reason, it was the best decision I never planned to make. The admission, honest, unguarded, reflected how far they'd both traveled from their first cautious interactions. The gangster who had maintained careful control, and the desperate mother who had approached every offering with suspicion, had evolved into partners who could acknowledge vulnerability, share uncertainty, build trust, despite unlikely beginnings. What happens next? Hayden asked, echoing a question they had posed to each other throughout their journey. For us, for the organization, for the future we're creating. Ezra considered this, his gaze on the moonlit lake but his thoughts clearly focused on larger horizons. We continue the evolution, the pharmaceutical program, the Bishop Institute, the family businesses. We build structures that outlast us, that benefit others beyond our immediate circle. Legacy, Hayden summarized. Not just financial security but lasting impact. Precisely, he turned to face her fully. And for us personally, we create a family unlike any that has carried the Bishop name before, one defined by choice rather than obligation, by shared vision rather than shared blood, by the future we're building rather than the past we've inherited. The promise resonated deeply with Hayden, this unlikely partnership that had begun with a mistaken text message, now extending into deliberate creation, purposeful construction of something neither could have envisioned alone. I'd like that, she said simply, as they stood together overlooking the water, the moonlight illuminating their shared domain. Hayden reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them here. From a freezing apartment with no electricity to a lakefront property with advanced security systems. From watered-down formula to educational opportunities most children would envy. From desperate survival to strategic creation. All because she had texted a wrong number, and a gangster had chosen to respond with unexpected humanity. Sometimes, she thought, the most profound connections began with the simplest accidents, an error that, in retrospect, looked remarkably like fate.